My eldest son, who used to work for the FBI, suddenly called me at midnight. His voice was not the voice of a son greeting his father. It was the voice of an agent in the field. "Shut everything down," he hissed. "Turn off all the lights and get to the basement immediately. Do not let your son-in-law know." "You are scaring me, Marcus," I whispered, clutching the phone. "Do not ask questions. Just do it." I followed his instructions, trembling as I crawled into the crawl space under the stairs. But when I looked outside through the narrow basement window, I saw something that made my heart stop. I saw my son-in-law, the man who eats at my table every Sunday, handing a blueprint of my house to a man in a ski mask. And then he unlocked the back door for him. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to question who you can really trust in your own home. I am Thaddeus Moore, 71 years old. For 30 years, I was the chief engineer for the Chicago Department of Urban Planning. I know this city better than I know the back of my own hand. I know where the foundations are strong, and I know where the sinkholes wait to swallow entire blocks. I spent my life designing systems that keep people safe. I built bridges that can withstand hurricanes and tunnels that can survive earthquakes. But as I lay on the cold concrete floor of my basement, clutching a heavy iron wrench, I realized I had made the most fatal error an engineer can make. I had built my life on a foundation of lies. It started at exactly 2 a.m. The house in Oak Park was silent. It is a big house. Too big for just me and my wife Viola now that the kids are grown. But Viola loves this house. She loves the high ceilings and the mahogany staircase and the way the neighbors look at it when they drive by. To Viola, appearances are everything. To me, it is just a structure. A structure that groans in the wind and costs a fortune to heat. I was in a deep sleep dreaming of the fishing trip I never got to take when the phone rang. Not the house phone. Not my cell phone, but the red landline that sits on my nightstand. Only one person has that number. Marcus. My eldest son Marcus has not been home for Christmas in 5 years. He is a ghost in this family. Viola calls him the ungrateful one. She cries about how he abandoned us for his job in Washington, D.C., but I know better. Marcus is not ungrateful. He is observant. He saw the cracks in this family long before I did, and he chose to get out before the roof collapsed. I picked up the receiver. My hand was shaking. "Nobody calls on the red line with good news," Dad Marcus said. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. "Marcus, is that you?" I asked, wiping the sleep from my eyes. "Listen to me very carefully," Dad Marcus said. His voice was tight-clipped and professional. It was the voice he uses when he is coordinating a raid, not talking to his old man. "You are in danger. They are coming." "Who is coming?" I asked, sitting up. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. "Do not ask questions," Marcus snapped. "You have about 90 seconds. Get out of bed. Do not wake Mom. Do not make a sound. Go to the basement. Lock the door from the inside. And stay away from the windows." "But Viola," I stammered. "Mom is safe," Marcus said quickly. "It is you they want. Now move. And Dad, whatever you do, do not let Brent see you." Brent, my son-in-law, the man who married my daughter Layla 5 years ago. The real estate developer with the bright white smile and the firm handshake, the man who calls me Pop and brings me expensive scotch. "Why would I hide from Brent?" I asked. "He is sleeping in the guest room." "He is not sleeping," Marcus said grimly. "Just go, Dad. Go now." The line went dead. I sat there for a second, paralyzed. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 2:02 a.m. Beside me, Viola was softly snoring. She was wearing her silk eye mask. She looked peaceful. I wanted to wake her. I wanted to shake her and tell her that our son was on the phone and that the world was ending. But years of working on construction sites taught me that when the foreman yells, "Run, you run. You ask questions later." I slid out of bed. My knees popped. I am not a young man anymore. My joints ache when it rains and my breath comes shorter than it used to. But fear is a powerful motivator. It greased my joints and sharpened my senses. I did not put on my slippers. I walked barefoot on the cold hardwood floor. I crept out of the master bedroom and into the hallway. The house was dark, but the moonlight filtered through the large bay windows, casting long skeletal shadows across the floor. I looked toward the guest room down the hall. The door was slightly ajar. Marcus was right. Brent was not sleeping. The bed was empty. The sheets were undisturbed. A cold chill that had nothing to do with the drafty hallway ran down my spine. I moved to the staircase. I skipped the third step because I know it creaks. I built these stairs myself 20 years ago. I know every weakness. I made it to the kitchen. It smelled of the pot roast we had for dinner. A dinner where Brent had toasted to my health. He had raised a glass of wine and said, "Here is to Thaddeus, the rock of this family. May he live forever." I felt a wave of nausea. I opened the door to the basement. The hinges need oiling. They let out a low whine that sounded like a scream in the silence. I froze, waiting for a light to turn on, waiting for a voice to call out. Nothing. I slipped inside and locked the door behind me. I descended the wooden steps into the darkness. This basement is my sanctuary. It is where I keep my drafting table, my old blueprints, and my tools. It smells of cedar shavings and oil. It is the smell of honest work. I moved to the back of the room toward the small crawl space under the stairs where I keep the old archives. I squeezed myself into the tight space, pushing aside boxes of tax returns from the 90s. I was safe, or so I thought. But curiosity is a curse. There is a small window in the basement, a narrow slit of glass right at ground level that looks out into the backyard. We put it there to let in a little light for the garden plants I used to keep down here in the winter. I crawled toward it. I needed to see. I needed to know if Marcus was crazy or if I was. I pressed my face against the cool glass. The backyard was bathed in the silver light of the full moon. The prize-winning rose bushes that Viola loved so much were swaying in the wind. And there, standing on the patio, was Brent. He was wearing black. Not his usual tailored suits. He was wearing a black hoodie and dark jeans. He looked younger and harder than the man I knew. He was not alone. A tall figure stood next to him. A man dressed entirely in black, wearing a ski mask. He held a crowbar in one hand. My instinct was to scream, to bang on the glass and scare them away. But then I saw what Brent was doing. He was not fighting the intruder. He was not protecting his family. He was smiling. I saw his teeth glint in the moonlight. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. He unfolded it and held it up for the masked man to see. I squinted. I recognized that paper. It was the schematic of the house security system, the one I had drawn up myself, the one that showed exactly where the motion sensors were located. Brent pointed to a spot on the paper, then pointed to the back door. He was giving instructions. He was showing the wolf how to bypass the traps. Then he did something that broke my heart into 1,000 jagged pieces. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. He unlocked the back door. He held it open for the man in the ski mask. The masked man patted Brent on the shoulder, a gesture of familiarity, a gesture of partnership. Then the man raised his crowbar and smashed the glass of the kitchen window. Crash! The sound was explosive. I waited for the alarm. I waited for the siren that was loud enough to wake the dead. I had installed that system myself. It was top of the line. Silence. No siren, no flashing lights. No automated call to the police. Brent had disabled it. He had used the master code. The code only I and Viola knew. The code Viola must have given him. My legs gave out. I slumped against the concrete wall of the basement. This was not a robbery. Robbers do not have keys. Robbers do not have blueprints. This was a hit. They were coming for me. I thought about the conversation at dinner. I thought about how insistent Brent was that I try the new sleeping pills he bought for me. He said they were herbal. He said they would help me rest. I had not taken them. I threw them in the trash because I do not like pills. If I had taken them, I would be in a coma right now. I would be lying in my bed helpless while a man in a ski mask crept up the stairs. A surge of anger replaced the fear. It was a hot, burning anger that started in my gut and spread to my chest. I looked around the basement. My eyes adjusted to the gloom. I saw my workbench. I saw the pegboard where my tools hung in neat rows. I reached out and grabbed the biggest tool I could find, a heavy steel pipe wrench, the kind I used to use to tighten the main valves on the city water lines. It was cold and heavy in my hand. It felt solid. It felt real. Upstairs, I heard footsteps. Heavy boots on the hardwood floor. They were moving toward the master bedroom. They were going to find an empty bed, and then they were going to come looking for me. I gripped the wrench until my knuckles turned white. I am Thaddeus Moore. I built the foundations of this city. I have survived race riots, budget cuts, and political corruption. I have fought my way up from a ditch digger to a chief engineer, and I be damned if I let a man in a Gucci suit and a hired thug take me out in my own house. I took a deep breath. Marcus was right. The lights were out, the system was down, but they forgot one thing. They were on my turf now. And I know where all the bodies are buried because I dug the holes. I waited in the dark, listening to the floorboards creak above my head. Come on down, I whispered to the silence. Come and get your inheritance. The basement door handle rattled. They were here. I stood in the darkness of the basement, clutching that heavy iron wrench until my hands were numb. I waited for the door to burst open. I waited for the fight of my life. But the handle stopped rattling. The footsteps did not come down the stairs. Instead, they moved away, heavy and deliberate, heading back up toward the main floor, toward the master bedroom. I pressed my ear against the wooden ceiling beams, listening to the sounds of my home being violated. It was not the chaotic noise of a smash and grab. It was not the frantic searching of a junkie looking for quick cash. It was methodical. I heard drawers being ripped out and dumped onto the floor. I heard the mattress being overturned. I heard the distinct hollow thud of someone tapping on the walls. He was not looking for Viola S. jewelry. He was not looking for the cash I keep in the coffee can in the pantry. He was looking for the wall safe behind the painting of the Chicago skyline. The safe where I keep the deeds. The safe where I keep the original blueprints of the City S underground tunnels. My heart hammered against my ribs. Brent had given him the layout, but Brent did not know the combination. Only I knew the combination. Suddenly, a new sound shattered the night. The front door burst open. Freeze, police, the voice shouted. But it was not the police. I know the police. I worked with city officials for 30 years. Police enter a house with a tactical rhythm. This was a performance. The voice belonged to Brent. Then came the gunshots. Bang, bang. 2 shots fired in quick succession, but there was no sound of a body hitting the floor. There was no cry of pain. There was just the sound of glass breaking again, the back window this time, and the sound of running footsteps fading into the garden. The intruder had fled. Or rather, the actor had exited the stage. I heard running on the stairs. Screams, high-pitched and terrified. Daddy. Mom. It was Layla, my daughter. I stood there in the basement trembling, not from fear anymore, but from a cold realization. The play was over. The hero had arrived. Now it was time for the curtain call. I loosened my grip on the wrench. I could not be found holding a weapon. A scared old man does not fight back. A scared old man hides. If I wanted to survive the night, I had to play the role they had written for me. I had to be the victim. I hid the wrench behind a stack of old paint cans. I messed up my hair. I unbuttoned my pajama top to look disheveled. I took a deep breath, forcing my lungs to hyperventilate until my hands shook involuntarily. Then I unlocked the basement door. I crept up the stairs, my legs heavy as lead. The kitchen was a mess of shattered glass. The cold night air blew in through the broken window, chilling the sweat on my skin. I walked into the living room. The lights were blazing now. Brent stood in the center of the room. He looked like a statue of a savior. He was holding a black pistol in his right hand, the barrel pointed safely at the floor. His chest was heaving. His hair was perfectly tousled. Viola was clinging to his left arm, sobbing into his shoulder. Layla was on her knees, clutching his leg, looking up at him with eyes full of adoration and terror. "Oh, thank God," Viola wailed. "Thank God you came, Brent. He was going to kill us." Brent holstered the gun with a smooth, practiced motion. He wrapped his arms around both women, pulling them into a protective embrace. "I'm sorry I was late," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I drove as fast as I could. I stood in the doorway watching them. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. "Thaddeus," Viola screamed when she saw me. "Oh my God, Thaddeus." She broke away from the huddle and ran to me, checking me for injuries. Her hands were cold. Her eyes were wide. "Where were you?" she cried. "We heard noises. We were so scared." I slumped my shoulders, leaning against the doorframe for support. I let my jaw hang loose. I was in the basement," I stammered, pitching my voice to sound weak and brittle. I heard the glass break. I ran. I hid under the stairs. I looked at Brent. I waited for him to mock me. I waited for the sneer, but he stayed in character. He walked over to me, his face a mask of concern. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a heavy, possessive hand. "It is okay, Pop," he said gently. "You did the right thing. At your age, you cannot be taking risks. You survived. That is what matters." I looked down at his shoes. They were black combat boots, muddy. He had been in the garden. He had been outside letting the wolf in, and now he was inside wiping his feet on my gratitude. "How did you know?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the floor. "How did you know to come?" Brent sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I do not know, Pop," he said. "Call it a sixth sense. I woke up with this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach, a feeling that something was wrong at the house. I tried to call, but nobody answered, so I just grabbed my gun and drove over. I saw the back door open, and I just reacted. He looked at Layla. "I am just glad I got here in time," he said. "Another minute and, well, is not think about that." Layla stood up and threw her arms around his neck, kissing his face. "You are a hero," she sobbed. "You saved us, baby. You saved us all." I watched my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders, the girl I had taught to ride a bike. She was looking at this snake like he was St. George slaying the dragon. She did not ask why he had a gun. She did not ask how he made a 20-minute drive in 5 minutes. She just consumed the lie because it tasted sweet. "We need to call the police," Viola said, her voice trembling. "I already did," Brent said quickly. "They are on their way. I have a buddy in the precinct, Detective Miller. I called him directly. He will handle everything quietly. We do not want the press swarming the lawn, right? Think of the reputation." Viola nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, you are right. No press. It would be too much. Of course. Control the narrative. Control the investigation." "I need to sit down," I said, clutching my chest. My heart. Brent immediately grabbed a chair and helped me into it. "Easy, Pop. Easy," he cooed. "Layla, get your father a glass of water. Viola, where are his pills?" "The new ones I bought him." Viola rushed to the kitchen. Layla ran to the bathroom. I was alone with him for 10 seconds. He leaned in close, pretending to check my pulse. His breath smelled of mint and gunpowder. "That was a close one, Thaddeus." He whispered, his voice dropping the hero act for just a split second. "A man your age really should be more careful with security. Next time, you might not be so lucky." I looked up at him. I saw the glint in his eyes. It was not concern. It was a warning. "I am just an old man, Brent," I whispered back, letting my head loll to the side. I was terrified. I was shaking like a leaf. I hid like a rat in a hole. He smiled. A cold, predatory smile. "Good," he said, patting my cheek. "Rats survive if they stay in their holes. Remember that." Layla came back with the water. Viola came back with the pills. "Here, Daddy," she said, handing me the glass. "Drink this." I took the glass. My hand shook, spilling some water on my shirt. I drank it greedily. "Here, take your medicine," Viola said, holding out 2 blue pills. "These will help you sleep. They will calm your nerves." I looked at the pills. The blue pills Brent had brought over last week. The ones I had thrown away. I took them. I put them in my mouth. I took a sip of water. But I did not swallow. I learned a trick in the army 50 years ago. I slid the pills under my tongue. "Thank you, Viola," I said. "I feel better already." The blue and red lights of a police cruiser flashed through the front window, but there was no siren, just a silent arrival. "Detective Miller is here," Brent announced, checking his watch. "Stay here. I will go talk to him. I will give him the statement so you do not have to relive the trauma." He walked out the front door like he owned the place. I sat there surrounded by my wife and daughter. They were safe. But they were not mine anymore. They belonged to him. He had bought their loyalty with a staged break-in and a fake rescue. I felt a vibration in the pocket of my pajama pants. My burner phone, the one I had grabbed from the basement. I looked around. Viola was busy sweeping up glass. Layla was staring out the window, watching her husband talk to the police. I pulled the phone out slightly, shielding it with my hand. One new message. From Marcus. I hacked the traffic cams. Brent was parked down the street for an hour before he came in. He waited for the signal. "Do not trust anyone, Dad, not even Mom. She opened the safe 3 days ago," I saw the log. The air left my lungs. Viola, my wife of 40 years, the woman who prayed every Sunday, the woman who was currently sweeping glass with tears in her eyes. She had opened the safe. She had given him the combination. I looked at her. She caught my eye and smiled a weak, trembling smile. "Try to rest, Thaddeus," she said. "Brent has everything under control." "Yes," I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. "He certainly does." Another vibration. A second message. "He is turning the study into his command center. He is going to move in to protect you. You need to get eyes in that room. I am sending a package to your old P.O. box tomorrow. Pick it up. Bug his office. We need to hear what he says when the hero mask comes off." I closed my eyes. The wrench was still in the basement. But I realized now that the real weapon I needed was not made of iron, it was made of information. Brent thought he had won. He thought he had terrified the old engineer into submission. He thought I was a rat in a hole. But he forgot what rats do. Rats gnaw. They chew through wires, they chew through foundations, they chew until the whole house comes down. I swallowed the water, but I spit the pills into my handkerchief when Viola turned away. "I am going to bed," I announced, standing up slowly. "I am exhausted." "I will help you upstairs," Layla offered. "No," I said. "I can manage. Go be with your husband. He needs you." I walked to the stairs. I climbed them one by one. I walked past the master bedroom where the mattress was overturned. I walked into the guest room, the room Brent had claimed. I looked around. It was clean, sterile. I walked to the window and looked down. I saw Brent shaking hands with the police officer. They were laughing. The officer clapped him on the back. It was a club of wolves. And I was the sheep they were planning to roast. I went to my room and closed the door. I locked it. I pulled the pills out of my handkerchief and flushed them down the toilet. I went to my closet and pulled out my old briefcase, the one I used when I was the chief engineer. I opened it. Inside were my drafting tools, my compass, my ruler, and a stack of blank paper. I sat down at my desk. My hands were steady now. I took a pen. Title: Operation Demolition. Subject: Brent Miller. Objective: total structural failure. I started writing. I wrote down everything I had seen. The key, the blueprint, the smile, the blue pills. Marcus was right. I was alone in this house, but I was not helpless. I am Thaddeus Moore, and tomorrow I was going to start digging. The house was quiet now. The police had left. Brent was downstairs, probably pouring himself a celebratory drink from my liquor cabinet. Let him drink. Let him toast his victory, because the hangover was going to be lethal. The morning sun did not bring warmth to the house in Oak Park. It only illuminated the destruction. The shattered glass on the kitchen floor glittered like diamonds, but they were sharp and dangerous. I sat at the kitchen table, clutching a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. My hands were trembling. This time, I did not have to fake it. The adrenaline from the night before had crashed, leaving behind a cold, hollow fear that settled in the marrow of my bones. Across the table sat Detective Miller. He was a large man with a neck that spilled over his collar and eyes that looked bored. He did not look like a man investigating an attempted home invasion. He looked like a man waiting for his lunch break. He had a notepad in front of him, but I had not seen him write a single word. "So let me get this straight," Mr. Moore, Miller said, taking a loud slurp of coffee. "You did not get a good look at the guy." I shook my head, keeping my eyes down. "No, sir. It was dark. I was in the basement. I just heard the glass break and I hid." Miller nodded as if this confirmed his own theory. "Typical. Probably just a junkie looking for electronics to pawn. We have had a string of break-ins in the neighborhood lately. They get desperate. They smash a window, grab a laptop, and run. A junkie. I have worked in city planning for 30 years. I know what junkies do. Junkies do not wear tactical gear. Junkies do not have a partner who waits by the back door with a key. And junkies certainly do not run away just because someone fires a warning shot into the ceiling. But I did not say that. I just nodded. "I suppose you are right, officer," I whispered. "I am just glad my son-in-law was here." Miller looked over at Brent, who was leaning against the counter, looking every inch the concerned protector. "Yeah, you are lucky," Miller said, winking at Brent. "Mr. Miller here is a hero. Most guys would have frozen. He took action. You owe him one. I owe him one." The irony tasted like bile in my throat. Miller stood up, closing his empty notebook. "Well, we will file a report. We will increase patrols in the area for a few nights, but honestly, without a description or fingerprints, there is not much we can do. My advice, get a better alarm system. Or maybe a dog." He walked out the door without dusting for prints. He did not check the back lock for signs of forced entry. He did not even look for the shell casings from Brent S. gun. It was not an investigation. It was a formality. A rubber stamp on a crime scene that had been staged for an audience of one, me. After the door closed, the house fell silent. The kind of silence that feels heavy. Brent walked over to the table and sat down opposite me. He leaned forward, clasping his hands together. His face was a mask of deep concern. "Pop, we need to talk," he said gently. I looked up at him. I tried to make my eyes look watery and confused. "About what, Brent?" "About last night," he said. "Look, I did not want to say anything in front of the girls because I did not want to scare them. But that cop, he was being polite. The truth is, this neighborhood is changing. It is not safe anymore." He reached out and covered my hand with his. His palm was warm, but his touch felt like ice. "You froze last night, Thaddeus. You hid in the basement while a stranger was in your house. If I hadn't been here..." He let the sentence hang in the air, allowing my imagination to finish it. I know I stammered. I was terrified. I do not know what happened to me. I used to be strong. "You are getting older," Pop Brent said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It happens to the best of us. Your reflexes are slowing down. Your mind is not as sharp as it used to be. You are vulnerable here, and frankly it is dangerous for Viola too. If you cannot protect her, who will?" I looked at Viola. She was standing by the sink, washing the same plate for the 5th time. Her back was to us. "What are you suggesting, Brent?" I asked. Brent sighed, as if the words caused him great pain. "I made some calls this morning. There is a place called Silver Oaks. It is just outside the city. It is a premium assisted living facility. 5-star dining, 24-hour security medical staff on site. It is like a resort, Pop." A resort. He meant a warehouse for the dying. He meant a prison where I would be medicated into oblivion while he sold my house and drained my accounts. "I can cover the costs," Brent continued quickly. "You do not have to worry about a dime. I just want you to be safe. I want you to be somewhere where you do not have to hide in a basement." I looked at Viola. "Viola," I said softly, "what do you think? Do you want to go to a home?" Viola turned around. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She walked over to the table and stood next to Brent. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thaddeus," she said, her voice trembling, "maybe he is right. Last night, seeing you huddled under those stairs, it broke my heart. You looked so frail. And lately, you have been forgetting things. You leave the stove on. You forget names." I stared at her. I have never left the stove on in my life. I remember the hydraulic pressure ratio of the 1998 dam project, but she claims I forget names. "You think I am losing my mind, Viola?" I asked. "I think you are tired," she said, looking away. "I think we are both tired, and Brent is offering us a way to rest." It was a tag team match. The physical threat from the night before, followed by the psychological attack in the morning. They were trying to break my spirit. They wanted me to sign myself away voluntarily. I pulled my hand away from Brent. "I need to think about it," I said, standing up. My legs felt shaky, and for once I was not acting. "Of course, Pop," Brent said. "Take your time. But do not take too long. That intruder might come back, and I cannot be here every night." I walked away from them. I shuffled down the hall to my bedroom. I closed the door and locked it. I leaned against the wood, breathing hard. Silver Oaks. I knew that place. It was built by one of Brent's developer friends. It was notorious for over-medicating patients to keep them quiet. If I went in there, I would never come out. I walked to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me looked old. Gray stubble, tired eyes, but the fire behind the eyes was still burning. I looked down at the counter. There it was, the amber prescription bottle. Digoxin, 125 micrograms. Take 1 daily for heart arrhythmia, my heart pills. I have been taking them for 5 years, ever since I had a mild flutter during a stress test. The doctor said it was precautionary. But then I remembered Marcus' text, "Do not trust anyone, not even Mom." And then I remembered something else, something Viola had said downstairs. "You leave the stove on, you forget names." I had been feeling foggy lately. Some mornings I woke up and could not remember the day of the week. My hands shook. My heart raced even when I was sitting still. I thought it was just age. I thought it was just the stress. I picked up the bottle. It looked normal. The label had my name on it, Thaddeus Moore, Dr. Stevens, Walgreens Pharmacy. But Brent had picked up this refill last week. He said he was going to the store anyway and wanted to save me the trip. I opened the bottle. The pills were small and white. They looked exactly like the ones I had taken for years, but looks can be engineered. I poured a few into a tissue and wrapped them up. I put the tissue in my pocket. I needed to know. I unlocked the bedroom door and walked back out to the kitchen. "I am going for a walk," I announced. "I need some fresh air to clear my head." Viola looked up alarmed. By yourself, Thaddeus? Is that safe? I will stay on the block, I said, grabbing my coat. Just around the corner. I need to think about Silver Oaks. Brent smiled. Good. Think about it, Pop. It is the best move. I walked out the front door. I walked slowly until I turned the corner. Then I walked faster. I walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. I took the number 12 bus downtown. I sat in the back, pulling my hat down low. I did not go to a pharmacy. A pharmacist would just look at the markings and tell me what the book says. I needed a chemist. I went to the university, the engineering department. Professor Harris was an old friend. We had worked together on the tunnel integrity project in the 90s. He was retired now, but he still had lab access. I found him in his office grading papers. Thaddeus, he said, surprised. You look like you have seen a ghost. I need a favor, Jim, I said, closing the door. And I need you to not ask any questions. I handed him the tissue. Analyze these, I said. Tell me exactly what is in them, not what they are supposed to be, what they are. Jim looked at me then at the pills. He saw the desperation in my eyes. He nodded. Give me an hour. I sat in his office staring at the clock. Every minute felt like an hour. I thought about Viola. I thought about the way she used to look at me when we were young. I thought about the way she handed me my pill every morning with a glass of orange juice and a smile. Here you go, honey. For your heart. Jim came back 45 minutes later. He was holding a printout. His face was pale. Thaddeus, where did you get these? He asked. Are they digoxin? I asked, bracing myself. Jim shook his head. No. They are pressed to look like digoxin. The shape, the color, the stamp. It is professional-grade counterfeiting, but chemically, he pointed to a spike on the graph. This is scopolamine, Thaddeus. It is a heavy sedative used to treat motion sickness, but in high doses. It causes hallucinations, compliance, and memory loss. My blood ran cold. Compliance. The drug they call the devil's breath. And this, Jim continued, pointing to another spike. This is arsenic. Trace amounts. Not enough to kill you instantly, but enough to weaken the heart muscle over time. Enough to mimic natural heart failure if you take it every day for a few months. I sat back in the chair. The room spun. Arsenic and scopolamine. They were not just trying to make me senile. They were trying to kill me. Slowly. Painfully. And they were making me thank them for it. And the worst part, Brent brought the pills into the house. But Viola administered them every morning. She watched me swallow the poison. She watched my hands shake. She watched me forget my words. And she told me it was just old age. She knew. She had to know. You do not give your husband poison by accident for months. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. My wife, the mother of my children, the woman I had built that house for. She had looked at me across the breakfast table for 40 years and decided that I was worth more dead than alive. I stood up. I took the printout. Thaddeus, Jim said, grabbing my arm. You need to go to the police. This is attempted murder. No police, I said, my voice sounding like gravel. The police are in on it, or at least the ones who matter are. I thanked him and walked out. I walked back to the bus stop. The city looked different now. The buildings I had helped design seemed to loom over me like tombstones. I had the proof. I had the motive. And I had the weapon. I took the bus back to Oak Park. I walked the 3 blocks to my house. I saw Brent's car in the driveway. I saw the light on in the kitchen. I stopped at the edge of the lawn. I reached into my pocket and touched the tissue with the remaining pills. They wanted a senile old man. They wanted a victim. I walked up the driveway. I opened the front door. Viola was in the living room watching TV. She looked up. Did you have a nice walk, dear? She asked. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the lines around her eyes. I saw the slight tremor in her hands. It was enlightening, Viola, I said, taking off my coat. Very enlightening. I walked past her. Did you decide about Silver Oaks? She called out. I stopped at the stairs. Not yet, I said. But I have decided one thing. What is that? I am done taking my medicine, I said. I think it is making me sick. I saw her stiffen. I saw the flash of panic in her eyes. Oh, Thaddeus, you cannot stop, she said, standing up. The doctor said it is vital for your heart. You could have a heart attack. I smiled, a cold, hard smile, My heart is stronger than you think, Viola. It takes a lot more than a little white pill to stop it. I walked up the stairs, leaving her standing there in the silence of her own guilt. I went to my room. I sat down at my desk. I took out the printout and hid it inside the lining of my old briefcase. Marcus was right. There was no one to trust. The house was not a home. It was a kill box. And I was the target. But targets shoot back. I pulled out a blank sheet of paper. Step 1. Secure the perimeter. Step 2. Identify the enemy. Step 3. Eliminate the threat. I picked up my pen. Viola was no longer my wife. She was hostile number 2. And tomorrow, I was going to introduce her to the man she thought she had killed. I told Viola I was going to the library. It was the only place she believed I still had agency. She watched me leave from the kitchen window, her eyes tracking me like a guard tower searchlight. I walked 3 blocks east, then doubled back through the alley behind the butcher shop, just like I used to do when I was inspecting unauthorized construction sites in the 80s. I made sure no one was following me. My heart was pounding a rhythm that the fake medicine was supposed to suppress, but fear is the only stimulant I needed. I descended the concrete ramp into the public parking garage beneath the city plaza. The air down here was thick with exhaust fumes and the damp chill of underground concrete. It was a smell I knew well. It was the smell of the city's foundations. I saw the car parked in the darkest corner of Level C, a black sedan with tinted windows, nondescript, forgettable, the kind of car that exists to be invisible. I approached the passenger side. The lock clicked open with a mechanical snap. I slid inside. The interior smelled of stale coffee and gun oil. Sitting behind the wheel was my son, Marcus. I had not seen him in 5 years. The last time was at Christmas when he got into a shouting match with Brent about politics and stormed out. Viola had called him a disgrace. I had stayed silent. That silence was my greatest sin. He looked older. The boy who used to build Lego skyscrapers in my living room was gone. In his place was a man carved out of granite. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow that I had never seen before. His eyes were tired, red-rimmed but sharp as broken glass. He did not look at me. He was watching the mirrors scanning the shadows of the garage. "Hello, Dad," he said. His voice was gravel. "Hello, son," I whispered. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to grab his shoulder and tell him I missed him. But the energy in the car was too kinetic, too dangerous for sentimentality. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a thick manila folder. He dropped it on my lap. It was heavy. "Read it," he said. I opened the folder. The first page was a photograph of Brent, but he was not wearing his tailored suits. He was sitting at a table in a dimly lit club, wearing a tropical shirt, sweating profusely. Sitting across from him were 2 men with tattoos climbing up their necks. I flipped the page. Bank statements, wire transfers, shell companies in the Cayman Islands. "What is this?" I asked my engineer brain, trying to make sense of the chaos. "We call it the crocodile file," Marcus said, still watching the mirrors. "Because crocodiles smile before they drag you under." He pointed to a figure circled in red on the 3rd page. $10 million, Marcus said. "That is what your son-in-law owes to the Sinaloa cartel." I dropped the paper. 10 million. He tried to play big shot. Marcus explained, his voice devoid of emotion. He thought he could wash money for them through his real estate developments. He thought he was smarter than the guys who invented the game. But he got greedy. He skimmed off the top to pay for his cars and his vacations and that fancy watch he wears. Marcus turned to look at me for the first time. The intensity in his eyes frightened me. They found out Dad, and they gave him an ultimatum. Pay back the 10 million plus interest by the end of the month or they will skin him alive. Literally, I felt sick. The nausea rose in my throat. Brent was not just a failure. He was a dead man walking. "But he does not have $10 million, I said. "He is broke. I heard him arguing with the bank on the phone last week." Marcus nodded. "Exactly. He is desperate. And a desperate man is a dangerous man. That is why he needs your land. My land. The 5 acres in the industrial district that I bought 30 years ago for pennies. It was just a vacant lot full of weeds and old concrete." Why, I asked. "That land is worthless. The zoning laws prevent residential development. He cannot build condos there." "He does not want to build condos," Marcus said. "He wants to sell it. He has a buyer lined up, a holding company called Vertigo Industries." I frowned. Vertigo. I knew that name. They were a subsidiary of a massive chemical conglomerate. They offered to pay $12 million for the land, Marcus said, just enough to clear his debt and leave him with a nice profit to run away with. But why would they pay $12 million for a dump, I asked. Marcus leaned closer. Because of what is underneath it, Dad. You are the engineer. You tell me. I closed my eyes and visualized the subterranean map of Chicago. I saw the layers of limestone, the clay, and the water tables. I mentally zoomed in on my plot of land in the industrial district, and then it hit me, like a sledgehammer. The Deep River Aquifer, I whispered. Marcus nodded. My land sat directly on top of one of the largest untouched freshwater reserves in the state. It was a geological anomaly, a pocket of pure water protected by a layer of shale. Vertigo Industries does not want the land, Marcus said, his voice dripping with disgust. They want to drill through the shale. They want to use the aquifer as a dumping ground for toxic runoff from their new pesticide plant. It is cheaper than processing the waste. They pump the poison down, it mixes with the water table, and within 5 years, half of Chicago is drinking lead and carcinogens. I stared at him. The horror was total. Brent knew this. He had to know. You cannot sell land to a chemical company without an environmental impact survey. He knows, Marcus confirmed. He does not care. He is willing to poison 3 million people to save his own skin. He is willing to turn your legacy into a toxic waste dump just to pay off a drug lord. I looked down at the photo of Brent, the man who sat at my table, the man who called me Pop. He was not just a thief, he was a monster. And Viola? I asked, my voice trembling. Does she know? She knows he is in trouble, Marcus said. She knows he needs money. But she does not know about the cartel, and she certainly does not know about the water. She just thinks he is a brilliant businessman hitting a rough patch. She thinks selling that land is the ticket to her dream life in Paris. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a pen, a heavy, expensive fountain pen. We have to stop him, I said, gripping the file. We have to call the police. We have the evidence. No. Marcus snapped. The police are too slow, and Brent has friends in the precinct like that detective who came to your house. If we move now, he will panic, he will run, or worse, the cartel will act. If they think the deal is off, they will kill him, and if they come for him while he is living in your house. He let the sentence hang. I pictured men with machine guns storming my living room. I pictured Layla in the crossfire. So what do we do, I asked. Marcus pointed to the last document in the folder. It was a power of attorney form. A general durable power of attorney granting Brent Miller full control over all my assets, including real estate. You have to sign this, Marcus said. I recoiled. Are you crazy? You want me to give him the weapon? I want you to give him the rope, Marcus said, his eyes hard. We need him to feel safe. We need him to think he has won. We need him to take this document to the cartel and to Vertigo Industries. We need to catch him in the act of the transaction. He tapped the paper. If you sign this, he will set up the meeting. He will bring the cartel representatives and the chemical company lawyers into the same room to sign the final sale. That is when we strike. That is when we get them all. Conspiracy, racketeering, environmental terrorism. We take down the whole network. But if I sign this, I whispered, he could sell it tomorrow. He could take everything. He won't sell it tomorrow, Marcus said. The closing is scheduled for Saturday night, the night of your birthday party. He wants to do it while the house is full of people, so he has an alibi. He thinks it is the perfect cover. Saturday, my 72nd birthday. So I have to play the fool I asked. I have to go back there and let him drug me. I have to let him smirk at me. Yes, Marcus said. You have to be the senile old man one last time. You have to let him believe he has outsmarted you. I looked at my son. I saw the pain in his face. He was asking me to walk into the fire. He was asking me to be the bait. I am scared, Marcus, I admitted. I am not an agent. I am an engineer. I build things. I do not destroy them. Marcus reached out and finally touched my arm. His grip was strong. You are the toughest man I know, Dad, he said. You built this city. You held this family together even when Mom was difficult. You can do this. He paused. I stayed away for 5 years because I knew my job put you in danger, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I wanted to protect you from my world, but my world came to you anyway. I am sorry, Dad. I am so sorry I wasn't there to stop him sooner. I covered his hand with mine. "You are here now, son," I said. I took the pen. I looked at the document. It was a death warrant for my property, but it was also a trap for the man who threatened my blood. "I will sign it," I said, "but I am not signing it with my right hand." Marcus looked confused. "What?" I smiled a thin, grim smile. 10 years ago, after I broke my wrist, I filed a document with the county clerk. I updated my official signature. I sign all legal documents with my left hand now. My right-handed signature, the one I used for 30 years, is technically invalid for any transaction over $10,000. Marcus's eyes widened. Then he smiled, a real smile. The smile of the boy who used to build Legos. "You old fox," he whispered. "So even if the FBI is late," I said, "even if he tries to sell it, the contract is void." "It is a fail-safe," Marcus said, nodding. "That is brilliant." I signed the paper. With my right hand. I made it look shaky. I made it look like the scrawl of a dying man. I handed the folder back to him. "One more thing," Marcus said, putting the folder away. "I need you to wear a wire." He pulled out a small black button. "It looks like a replacement button for your cardigan. Sew it on. It has a range of 1 mile. I will be listening. Every word he says, every threat, every confession. I need you to get him talking, Dad. I need him to admit what he is doing." I took the button. It was tiny. A marvel of engineering. "I can do that," I said. Marcus checked his watch. "You have been gone 40 minutes. You need to get back before Viola gets suspicious." I opened the car door. The damp air of the garage hit me. "Dad," Marcus said. I turned back. "Happy birthday in advance," he said. "I got you a present. It is in the trunk of the Cartel S car. I will give it to you on Saturday." I chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Just make sure you bring the handcuffs," I said. I got out of the car. I walked up the ramp. I walked back into the daylight. The city looked the same, but I saw it differently now. I saw the invisible lines of the aquifer beneath the pavement. I saw the fragile balance of the structures. I walked back to the house, back to the prison. I walked in the front door. Viola was waiting in the hallway. Her arms were crossed. "You were gone a long time, Thaddeus," she said, her voice sharp. I looked at her. I touched the button in my pocket. "I got lost." "Viola," I said, shuffling my feet. I got a little confused. "I forgot the way home." She softened instantly. The predator relaxing when the prey shows weakness. "Oh, Thaddeus," she sighed. "See, this is why you need to rest. Come on. Brent is in the study. He has some papers for you to look at." I smiled vacantly. "Good," I said. "I love papers." I followed her into the lioness den, but this time the sheep was wearing armor. I walked back into the house, and the air felt different. It was heavy and stagnant, like the air in a tunnel before the ventilation fans kick in. I stood in the hallway for a moment, letting my shoulders slump and allowing my jaw to hang slightly loose. I had to shed the skin of the engineer, the man who had just plotted a counterstrike in a parking garage, and put on the skin of the victim. I had to become the confused old man they wanted me to be. Viola was waiting in the living room. She was pacing back and forth, wringing her hands. When she saw me, her face transformed into a mask of relieved concern, but her eyes were searching, scanning me for signs of rebellion. "Thaddeus," she cried, rushing over to me. "Where have you been? We were so worried." Brent was about to call the police again. I looked at her with vacant, watery eyes. I let a slight tremor run through my hands. I got lost. "Viola," I whispered, my voice raspy and weak. I went for a walk to clear my head, but the streets all looked the same. I could not remember which way to turn. I got scared. Viola grabbed my arm and her grip was tight. "Oh, Thaddeus." She sighed, and I heard the satisfaction in her voice. "See, this is exactly what we were talking about. You are not safe out there alone. Your mind, it is playing tricks on you." Brent appeared from the study. He was wearing his suit jacket again, looking every inch the master of the house. He walked over with a confident stride, the heels of his shoes clicking on the hardwood floor I had laid myself. "Pop," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You gave us a scare. You cannot just wander off like that. Not after last night." I looked up at him. I remembered the photo Marcus had shown me, the sweat on his face, the fear in his eyes as he sat across from the cartel members. But right now, looking at me, he felt powerful. He felt like the predator. I am sorry, Brent, I stammered. I just, I felt so confused. But then I remembered you. I remembered how you saved us last night. I reached out and grabbed his hand. I squeezed it with my trembling fingers. You are my guardian angel, Brent, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I do not know what I would do without you. Brent smiled. It was a slow, arrogant smile that spread across his face like oil on water. He glanced at Viola and gave her a barely perceptible nod. The hook was set. That is what family is for, Pop Brent said, patting my shoulder. We protect each other. Come on into the study. Sit down. You look exhausted. They led me into my own study, the room where I had designed the City's flood control system. Now it smelled of Brent's expensive cologne and ambition. He guided me to the big leather chair behind the desk. My chair. But he had moved my things. My drafting compass was gone. My photos were pushed to the side. In the center of the desk sat a single crisp document. Viola stood next to me, her hand resting on the back of the chair, essentially boxing me in. Brent sat on the edge of the desk, looming over me. Pop Brent began, his tone serious and businesslike. While you were gone, Viola and I had a long talk. We are worried about you. The break-in last night, the confusion today. It is becoming too much for you to handle alone. I nodded slowly, staring at the wood grain of the desk. I feel it too, I whispered. I feel like I am losing my grip. Exactly, Viola chimed in softly. And we cannot let that happen. We need to secure the house, Thaddeus. We need to make sure our assets are protected so that if something happens to your memory, the family is not left vulnerable. Brent tapped the document on the desk. This is just a standard security measure, Pop, he said. It is a temporary power of attorney. It just gives me the legal authority to handle the security contracts, the insurance, and the maintenance of the property. It means you do not have to worry about the details anymore. You can just rest. I looked at the paper. General durable power of attorney. I know how to read blueprints, I know how to spot a structural flaw, and I know legal language. This was not temporary. This was absolute. It gave him the power to sell, lease, and liquidate everything I owned. It gave him the power to sell the land to Vertigo Industries. It gave him the power to poison the aquifer. But to them, I was just a senile old man looking at big, confusing words. Will this stop the men in masks from coming back? I asked, my voice trembling with feigned fear. Yes, Pop Brent said, leaning in close. If I have this, I can hire private security. I can upgrade the systems. I can make this place a fortress. But I need the authority to sign the checks and authorize the work. Viola leaned down and kissed the top of my head. It felt like the kiss of Judas. Just sign it. Thaddeus, she whispered. For me. For Layla. Let Brent take the burden off your shoulders. You have worked hard enough. It is time to let go. Time to let go. She was talking about my life, not just my property. I reached for the pen. It was a heavy Mont Blanc that Brent had placed there. I hesitated. I let my hand hover over the signature line, shaking violently. I do not know, I mumbled. My father always said, never sign anything you do not write yourself. Brent's patience cracked for a split second. I saw the flash of anger in his eyes, the desperation of a man who owes $10 million to murderers. Thaddeus, look at me, he said, his voice hardening. Do you trust me or not? Last night I stood between you and a gunman. Did your father ever do that? I am trying to save you here. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had staged a play to terrify me. You are right, I said softly. You are my guardian angel. I trust you, son. I picked up the pen. Now came the moment, the pivot point. 50 years ago, I was right-handed. I did everything with my right hand. But 10 years ago, during the inspection of the Crosstown Tunnel, a hydraulic line burst. It crushed 3 fingers on my right hand. I went through months of rehab. I regained the use of the hand, but the fine motor skills were never the same. Because of the liability involved with my engineering stamp, I had legally changed my official signature to my left hand. I filed the paperwork with the county, the state, and every bank I did business with. My right-handed signature, the one I used for 60 years, was now legally invalid for any binding contract. It was a relic, a ghost. Brent didn't know that. He had only been in the family for 5 years. He had never seen me sign a technical drawing. Viola knew, or she should have known. But Viola never paid attention to my work. She only paid attention to the paychecks. And right now she was too focused on the millions she thought she was about to inherit to look at which hand was holding the pen. I held the pen in my right hand. I let it shake. I let the tip scratch the paper. I signed. Thaddeus Moore. The letters were jagged. They looked like the writing of a frail old man, but more importantly, they slanted to the right. My official legal signature slants to the left. I finished the loop on the E and dropped the pen. There I sighed, leaning back in the chair, closing my eyes. It is done. Brent snatched the paper before the ink was even dry. He stared at it like a starving man staring at a feast. The relief that washed over him was palpable. He let out a breath he must have been holding for days. "Thank you, Pop," he said, his voice thick with triumph. "You made the right choice. You have no idea how much this helps." "Oh, I think I do, I thought." Viola patted my shoulder again. "Why do not you go upstairs and take a nap, Thaddeus?" she said. "You look drained. I will bring you some warm milk." "And your medicine," Brent added quickly. "Do not forget your medicine." I stood up, shuffling my feet. "Yes," I said. "A nap sounds good. I feel lighter somehow." I walked out of the study. I walked slowly up the stairs. As I reached the landing, I paused. I pressed my hand against the button on my cardigan, the wire Marcus had given me. I listened. Downstairs in the study, the door clicked shut. Then I heard Brent's voice. It was not the gentle voice of the son-in-law. It was loud, boisterous, and cruel. "I got it," he shouted. "I actually got it. The old fool signed it over." I heard the sound of paper being kissed. "Viola," I heard him say, "pack your bags. Once the deal clears on Saturday night, we are booking first-class tickets. Paris, Rome, wherever you want." And Thaddeus, Viola asked, her voice low. "Don't worry about Thaddeus," Brent laughed. "Once the house burns down on Saturday, he will be a tragic hero, the grieving widower who perished in the flames. It is cleaner this way, Viola. He is practically a vegetable anyway. We are doing him a favor." I gripped the banister. My heart was pounding, but not with fear, with a cold, hard rage. Then silence followed by the sound of dialing. I pulled out my burner phone and plugged in the earpiece Marcus had given me. I could hear the call clearly. "Hola," Brent said, his tone shifting to respectful submission. "It is me. Yes, I have the paper. It is signed. The land is yours. Tell the buyers to bring the check on Saturday. No complications. The old man is out of the picture. He trusts me completely. He called me his guardian angel." He laughed. A sick, twisted sound. "Yeah, I know. I am a genius. Just make sure you bring the receipt for my debt. I want to be clear. Totally clear." He hung up. I stood there on the landing, looking down at the hallway of the house I had built. He called me a vegetable. He called me a fool. He thought he had a golden ticket. But what he had was a worthless piece of paper signed by a hand that had no power. He was going to walk into a room on Saturday night with the cartel on one side and a chemical corporation on the other, and he was going to try to sell them a bridge to nowhere. And when they realized the contract was void, when they realized he had wasted their time and exposed their operation, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I walked into my bedroom and locked the door. I went to the window and looked out at the backyard. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. "My guardian angel," I whispered to the empty room. I sat down on the bed. I did not nap. I waited for nightfall. Because when the sun goes down, the rats come out. And tonight, I was going to start setting the traps. I pulled the loose floorboard up from under the bed. I took out my old engineering schematics. Saturday was 3 days away, 72 hours. I needed to weaken the gas line in the basement. I needed to loosen the bolts on the panic room door so it would lock from the outside but not the inside. I had work to do, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. The vegetable was about to become the butcher. The occupation of my home was swift and absolute. Within 24 hours of me signing that power of attorney document, Brent had transformed from a guest into a warden. He did not call it imprisonment, of course. He called it high security protection. He hired 2 private security guards, large men with thick necks and dead eyes who stood by the front and back doors. He told Viola they were there to keep the bad guys out. But I knew the truth. They were there to keep the old man in. My bedroom became my cell. Brent insisted that I stay upstairs for my own safety. He brought me my meals on a tray like I was an invalid. He took away my phone, claiming that hackers could use the GPS to track me. He even disconnected the television, saying the news would just upset my fragile heart. But the worst violation was the study. My study. The room where I had drafted the plans for the Southside Suspension Bridge. The room that smelled of old paper and cherry tobacco. Brent had cleared it out. He threw my drafting table into the garage. He boxed up my engineering awards. In their place, he installed a bank of computer monitors, a paper shredder, and a large gun safe. He sat in my leather chair, barking orders into his phone, turning my sanctuary into his command center. He thought he had neutralized me. He thought that by taking away my keys and my phone, he had cut me off from the world. But he forgot who he was dealing with. I am not just a homeowner, I am the architect. I designed this house in 1982. I drew every line. I calculated every load-bearing wall. And like every good engineer, I built in redundancies. I built in secrets. It was 2 a.m. on Thursday. The house was quiet. Viola was asleep in the guest room down the hall, having been displaced from our bed by Brent's paranoia. The guard at the front door was dozing in a chair. I got out of bed. I did not go to the door. I knew it was locked from the outside, a new feature Brent had installed that afternoon. I went to the closet. I pushed aside the rows of suits I no longer wore. I knelt down on the floorboards. To the untrained eye, the back of the closet looked like solid oak paneling. But I knew better. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a simple penny. I pressed it into a small groove in the wood and twisted. Click. The panel popped open. Behind it was not a secret passage. It was the main intake shaft for the HVAC system. When I built this house, I insisted on oversized ductwork. Viola complained about the cost at the time. She said we did not need industrial-grade ventilation. I told her it was for efficiency. But the truth was, I just liked knowing that the lungs of my house were big enough to breathe. I am 71 years old. My joints are stiff. My back aches. But desperation is a powerful lubricant. I squeezed my body into the cold metal shaft. It was tight. The dust of 30 years tickled my nose, but I held back the sneeze. I crawled on my elbows and knees, dragging myself through the darkness. I counted the rivets in the sheet metal just like I used to count the rivets on the bridge supports. 1, 2, 3, 4. I moved past the guest room. I moved past the kitchen. I reached the vertical drop that led to the basement. This was the hard part. I braced my back against one side of the shaft and my feet against the other. I shimmied down inch by inch using gravity and friction. My muscles screamed. My heart hammered against my ribs, the fake medicine forgotten in the face of real exertion. I reached the bottom vent. It was located behind the furnace in the basement. I kicked the grate. It gave way with a soft clang. I tumbled out onto the concrete floor, gasping for air. I lay there for a moment listening. Silence upstairs. The guards were deaf or lazy. I stood up and brushed the dust off my pajamas. I was in my domain now. The basement was filled with shadows. Brent had not bothered to secure this area. Why would he? It was just a place for old junk. I walked to the far wall behind the water heater. There was a pegboard covered in tools. I reached behind the board and flipped a switch that looked like a circuit breaker. A small green light flickered to life on a dusty gray metal box mounted on the wall. This was my masterpiece, the ghost box. In 1990, when the city was going through a wave of political corruption, I became paranoid. I was signing off on billion-dollar contracts. People were bugging phones. People were getting blackmailed. So I hardwired my own house. I ran copper audio lines through the walls disguised as electrical grounding wires. I placed analog microphones inside the light fixtures in every major room. It was not digital. It could not be hacked by a computer. It was pure physics. Sound vibration traveling down a wire to a receiver. I put on the heavy headphones. The leather was cracked and peeling. I turned the dial. Channel 1, the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator. Channel 2, the living room, the snoring of the guard. Channel 3, the study. I adjusted the gain. The static cleared. Voices. I heard the clink of glass, ice hitting crystal. Brent was drinking. Then I heard a woman's voice, high-pitched, anxious. "Layla, I cannot sleep, Brent," she was saying. "I feel sick." I walked past Daddy's room and he was so quiet. "Are you sure he is okay?" I pressed the headphones tighter against my ears. "He is fine, Layla." Brent's voice boomed, confident and dismissive. "He is sleeping like a baby. The medication is working." "But why do we have to lock him in?" Layla asked. "It feels wrong. He is my father. He built this house. We are protecting him, babe, Brent said. I told you. The cartel, I mean the people who are after us, they are dangerous. If they get to him, they will use him to get to me. There was a pause. I heard the sound of footsteps pacing. Brent, Layla said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I need to ask you something, and please do not lie to me. What is it? Brent snapped, sounding annoyed. The land, she said. The industrial lot. You said you found a buyer. Yeah. Vertigo Industries. Big players. I looked them up, Brent, Layla said. They are a chemical company. They make pesticides. Why do they want to buy a vacant lot in the middle of the city? I held my breath. Layla, my sweet, naive Layla. She had found a thread. Brent laughed. It was a smooth, practiced laugh. Baby, you are overthinking it. They are not building a factory there. They are buying the land for their corporate housing division. They want to build luxury condos for their executives. It is a gentrification play, condos, Layla asked, hopeful. Yes, condos, Brent lied easily. High-rise glass towers, retail on the bottom floor, a park on the roof. It is going to revitalize the whole neighborhood. Your dad would be proud. It is exactly the kind of project he used to dream about. I squeezed my eyes shut. The liar. The absolute snake. He was using my own dreams to sell his nightmare. Layla let out a sigh of relief. Oh, thank God, she said. I was worried. I do not know. I thought maybe you were in trouble again, like last time with the gambling. Gambling? Brent's voice turned ice cold. I told you I stopped gambling. This is business, Layla. Strictly business. But $12 million, Layla pressed. That is so much money. Does the land really cost that much? It is prime real estate, babe, Brent said. And once the deal closes on Saturday night, we are rich. I mean really rich. We can pay off the mortgage. We can move to Paris like you always wanted. We can get you that studio for your painting. Paris, Layla whispered. Yeah, Paris. Just you and me. And Mom and Dad, she asked. Brent hesitated. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. Of course, he said. We will get them the best care money can buy. Silver Oaks is beautiful, Layla. Your dad will love it there. They have a garden. He was selling her a fantasy. He was painting a picture of a perfect future over the canvas of a murder. But I realized something in that moment. Something important. Layla did not know. She knew about the debt, maybe. She knew he was stressed. But she did not know about the poison water. She did not know he was planning to burn the house down. She did not know he was killing me. She was not the wolf. She was the sheepdog who fell in love with the wolf. She was stupid, yes. She was blinded by love and greed. But she was not evil. Brent, Layla said, her voice trembling again. I love you. But I am scared. This feels fast. Trust me, Brent said. Just trust me until Saturday. After the party, it will all be over. I heard the sound of a chair scraping. Come here, he said. I took the headphones off. I could not listen to any more. I sat there in the dark basement staring at the green light of the ghost box. My daughter was innocent. That was a relief, but it was also a complication. If I destroyed Brent, I would break her heart. I would destroy the illusion of the life she thought she had. But if I did not destroy him, he would kill us all. I stood up. I turned off the ghost box. I had to get back upstairs. I had to be in my bed before the sun came up. But now I had a new objective. I was not just fighting for my life. I was fighting for her soul. I crawled back into the vent. The climb up was harder than the climb down. I had to fight gravity. I had to fight the burning in my chest. But as I dragged myself inch by inch through the metal tunnel, I made a promise. I would save Layla, even if she hated me for it. I would let her see the truth. I would let her see the blueprints of her husband's betrayal. And on Saturday night, when the walls came tumbling down, I would make sure she was standing clear of the debris. I reached my closet. I pushed the panel open. I crawled out onto the floor covered in dust and sweat. I closed the panel. I wiped the floor with my pajama shirt. I climbed back into bed. My heart was racing. My body was aching. But my mind was clear. Layla thought she was getting condos in Paris. She was about to get a front row seat to a demolition. And I was the one holding the detonator. The dining room table was set with Viola's best china, the gold-rimmed plates she usually saved for Christmas or Easter. The crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier light, and the smell of roasted lamb filled the air. To an outsider, it looked like a scene from a magazine, a prosperous family sitting down to a lovely meal. But to me, it felt like the Last Supper on death row. I sat at the head of the table, a position I had held for 40 years, but tonight I felt like a prop. Brent had dressed me in my best suit, but he had tied the tie a little too tight, almost like a noose. Before we came downstairs, he had grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "Listen to me, old man," he had hissed, his breath hot against my ear. "Tonight is crucial. These investors are very particular. You sit there, you eat your soup, and you smile. If you say a word about the pills or the basement or anything other than how happy you are to sell the land, I will put you in Silver Oaks tonight. Do you understand?" I had nodded, letting my mouth hang open in that slack-jawed way he seemed to like. I understood perfectly. I understood that he was terrified. The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. Brent jumped like he had been electrocuted. He smoothed his jacket, took a deep breath, and put on his salesman's smile. It was a brittle smile, one that did not reach his eyes. Viola rushed to the door. She was wearing her pearls fluttering around like a nervous bird. She thought these were executives from Vertigo Industries. She thought this was her ticket to Paris. When the guests walked in, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. There were 2 of them. The first man was introduced as Mr. Vega. He was short, stocky, and wore a suit that cost more than my car but fit him poorly across the shoulders. He did not look like a corporate executive. He looked like a cinder block wrapped in silk. His eyes were cold and dead like a shark S. The second man was taller, younger, and silent. He stood by the door watching the room with the practiced paranoia of a bodyguard. "Welcome," Viola chirped, oblivious to the danger standing on her welcome mat. "We are so honored to have you." Vega ignored her. He looked straight at Brent. "Is everything ready?" Vega asked. His voice was gravelly and accented. "Yes," Brent said, his voice cracking slightly. "Everything is prepared. The papers are ready. But first, dinner. Please sit." They moved to the dining room. Vega took the seat to my right. He smelled of heavy musk cologne and cigar smoke. He placed his phone on the table next to his silverware. It was a satellite phone, thick and rugged. Marcus had told me about that phone. "That is the command center, Dad," he had said. "All the orders come through that device. If we get that phone, we get the network." I stared at the phone. It was 6 inches away from my hand. It might as well have been on the moon. "So this is the patriarch," Vega said, turning his cold eyes on me. "Thaddeus Moore, the engineer." I looked at him, blinking slowly. I let my hand tremble as I reached for my water glass. "Hello," I mumbled, slurring my words slightly. "Nice to meet you, young man." Vega narrowed his eyes. He studied my face, scrutinizing the lines and the gray stubble. He was looking for a crack in the facade. He was a predator, and predators can smell fear. "He looks frail," Vega said to Brent, not bothering to lower his voice. "Are you sure he is competent to sign? My legal team does not want any complications later. If he dies next week, I do not want the estate challenging the sale." "He is fine," Brent said quickly, pouring wine with a shaking hand. "He has his good days and his bad days. Today is a good day." "Right, Pop." He kicked me under the table. Hard. The toe of his shoe dug into my shin. I flinched, but I turned it into a spasm. I dropped my fork. It clattered loudly onto the china plate. "Oops," I whispered. "Clumsy. Just clumsy." Viola rushed over to pick up the fork. "Oh, Thaddeus," she sighed. "Let me cut your meat for you." She stood over me, cutting the lamb into tiny pieces like I was a toddler. I felt a surge of humiliation burn in my chest. I built skyscrapers. I designed the drainage systems that keep this city dry. And now my wife was cutting my meat while a drug lord watched. But I swallowed my pride. Pride gets you killed. Patience gets you justice. We began to eat. The sound of silverware scraping against plates was the only noise in the room. Brent was trying to make small talk, asking about the market and real estate trends. Vega answered in monosyllables. Suddenly, Vega stopped eating. He wiped his mouth with the linen napkin and turned his entire body toward me. "Mr. Moore," he said, "Brent tells me you own the land in the industrial district. Why did you never develop it?" I looked up. This was a test. I wanted to," I stammered. "But there were water issues." The table went silent. Brent went pale. He kicked me again, harder this time. "Water issues," Vega repeated slowly. "What kind of water issues?" I looked at Brent. His eyes were wide, screaming at me to shut up. "The rain," I said, letting my voice trail off into a nonsensical ramble. "The rain comes down and the puddles get deep. Very deep. Good for ducks. Not good for buildings." I giggled. A high-pitched, senile sound. Vega stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a short barking sound. Ducks, he said. He thinks about ducks. He turned to Brent. You were right. His brain is mush. Brent let out a breath he must have been holding for a minute. I told you, Brent said, pouring more wine. He is harmless. He just wants to rest. He is happy to sell. Vega nodded. He reached for his wine glass, but his hand brushed against his phone. He moved it slightly closer to his plate. Good, Vega said. Saturday night we close. 12 million, cash and transfer, and then... He looked at me with a chilling smile. Then Mr. Moore can go feed the ducks permanently. The threat was clear. Saturday night was the deadline. After the signature, I was a loose end. Viola laughed nervously. Oh, Mr. Vega, you are so funny. Thaddeus loves the park. She didn't understand. She didn't speak the language of violence. The waiter, who was actually a catering staff hired by Brent for the night, brought out the soup course. It was a lobster bisque, piping hot and orange. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. Marcus had given me a dummy phone. It was a plastic replica of a standard satellite phone weighted to feel real. It was sitting in the inside pocket of my jacket. I had practiced the switch in front of the mirror for an hour. I needed a distraction. A big one. The waiter placed a bowl of steaming soup in front of me. I looked at the soup. I looked at Vega. I looked at the phone sitting by his right hand. I picked up my spoon. My hand was shaking violently now, and I didn't have to fake it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they could hear it. Careful, Thaddeus, Viola warned. It is hot. I lifted the spoon. I brought it halfway to my mouth. Then I let my body go rigid. I locked my jaw. I threw my head back. I kicked my legs out, slamming them against the underside of the table. Thaddeus Viola screamed. I let out a groan and flailed my right arm. My hand struck the soup bowl. It wasn't a little spill. It was a direct hit. The bowl flipped. The hot orange liquid flew across the table. It splashed onto the tablecloth. It splashed onto the bread basket. And it splashed directly onto Mr. Vega's lap. Vega roared. He jumped up from his chair, knocking it backward. You stupid old man, he shouted frantically, brushing the scalding soup off his expensive suit pants. Chaos erupted. Brent rushed over, grabbing napkins. I am so sorry, Mr. Vega. He has spells. I told you he has spells. Viola was screaming, crying, grabbing my shoulders. Thaddeus, breathe. Breathe. I slumped forward onto the table, my head resting on my arms, my body still twitching. The bodyguard had rushed to Vega, handing him a towel. Everyone was looking at Vega. Everyone was looking at the soup. Nobody was looking at the table. My left hand, the hand that was hidden under my body, slid across the tablecloth. I felt the cold, hard plastic of Vega's phone. I palmed it. In the same motion, I slid the dummy phone from my sleeve and placed it exactly where the real one had been. It took less than a second. It was the smoothest move of my life, a move born of 50 years of precise engineering calculations. I pulled the real phone into my lap and tucked it into my waistband under the table. Then I let out a long, moaning exhale and went limp. Brent grabbed my collar and pulled me back into my chair. He was furious. His face was red, his eyes bulging. Get him out of here, he snarled at Viola. Get him upstairs, now! Viola was weeping. She grabbed my arm, trying to pull me up. I am sorry, I mumbled, drool running down my chin. I am sorry. The ducks. Vega was standing by the window, wiping his pants. He was shaking with rage. Get him out of my sight, Vega hissed, before I forget that I am a businessman. Come on, Thaddeus, Viola sobbed, dragging me toward the stairs. I shuffled along, leaning heavily on her. I looked back one last time. Vega walked back to the table. He picked up the dummy phone. He wiped a spot of soup off the screen. He put it in his pocket. He didn't notice. He didn't notice the weight difference. He didn't notice the screen didn't light up. He was too angry about his ruined suit. I walked up the stairs, my legs feeling like jelly. I had done it. I had the crocodile's teeth in my pocket. Viola led me to my room. She pushed me onto the bed. You ruined everything, she hissed, wiping soup off her dress. Do you know who those men are? They are important, Thaddeus. And you are a mess. She didn't check if I was okay. She didn't ask if I was burned. She just looked at me with disgust. Stay here, she said. Do not come out. Brent will deal with you later. She slammed the door and locked it. I lay in the dark, listening to her footsteps fade away. I reached into my waistband and pulled out the satellite phone. It was heavy. It was warm. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up. Enter passcode. I didn't have the code, but I didn't need it. I pulled out my burner phone. I dialed Marcus. I got it, I whispered. I have the package. Good job, Dad. Marcus said, his voice tight with relief. Now listen carefully. Do not try to unlock it. It has a self-destruct wipe feature. Just keep it safe. Hide it where Brent will never look. I looked around the room. Where would Brent never look? I looked at the old Bible on my nightstand, the one Viola used to read every night before she started worshiping money. I opened the Bible. I hollowed out the pages of the book of Revelation years ago to hide my emergency cash. The cash was gone, stolen by Brent weeks ago. But the hollow space remained. I placed the phone inside. I closed the book. Below me in the dining room, the dinner was ending. I could hear Brent apologizing. I could hear Vega's heavy footsteps leaving the house. They thought they had weathered the storm. They thought the old man had just had an accident. They didn't know that the accident had just stolen their empire. I lay back on the pillow and closed my eyes. My hand was burned from the soup. It throbbed with a dull, steady pain, but it was a good pain. It was the pain of victory. I imagined Marcus's team tracking the GPS signal from the dummy phone. They would realize soon enough that it was dead, but by then it would be too late. The real data, the contacts, the bank accounts, the hit list, it was all sitting right next to my head wrapped in the holy word. 2 days left. 48 hours until the party. I hoped Brent had a good dry cleaner, because the stain I was about to leave on his life was never going to wash out. The house was silent, but it was the silence of a bomb waiting to detonate. I sat on the edge of my bed with the heavy leather Bible open on my lap. The hollowed-out pages of the book of Revelation stared back at me, but instead of prophecies of the apocalypse, there was just the cold, black plastic of the satellite phone I had stolen from Vega. My hands were steady now. The adrenaline of the dinner party had faded, replaced by a cold, mechanical precision. I was no longer the scared old man spilling soup. I was the chief engineer, and I was looking at the blueprints of my own murder. I plugged the earpiece into my burner phone and dialed Marcus. I have it, I whispered into the dark. I have the phone. Good, Marcus said, his voice tight with tension. I am patching into the remote access tool. Hold the screen up to your window. I need to scan the encryption key. I moved to the window. The moonlight washed over the device. I held it steady. Got it, Marcus said. I am in. I am mirroring the data now. Give me 2 minutes. I waited. 2 minutes is a lifetime when you are sleeping under the same roof as your executioner. I could hear the faint sound of the television downstairs. Brent was watching sports. He was drinking my scotch and cheering for a team he did not care about, celebrating a victory he had not yet won. Okay, Dad, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. I am looking at the messages. I am looking at the timeline. Tell me, I said. Do not sugarcoat it, son. I need to know the load-bearing capacity of this disaster. Marcus took a deep breath. It is scheduled for Saturday night, he said. The night of your birthday party. I closed my eyes. Saturday. 48 hours away. The plan is detailed. Marcus continued reading from the decrypted files. Vega is bringing the contract to the party. They are going to take you into the study around 9 o'clock. They are going to make you sign the final deed transfer. Once the electronic confirmation comes through... He stopped. Go on, I said. Once the transfer is confirmed, Marcus said, his voice trembling with rage. Brent is going to switch your medication. He has a syringe prepared with a concentrated dose of potassium chloride. It stops the heart instantly. It looks like a massive myocardial infarction. A natural death for a 72-year-old man with a history of heart trouble. I nodded slowly in the dark. A clean death, no blood, no struggle. Just an old man's heart giving out after too much excitement at his party. And the house, I asked. Fire, Marcus said. They are going to rig the gas line in the basement. They want it to look like a tragic accident. A gas leak sparked by a faulty furnace. The house burns down. The evidence of the poisoning is destroyed. And Brent collects the insurance money on the property, plus the $12 million from the land sale. It was a perfect plan. Ruthless, efficient, and totally heartless. He was going to burn the home I built with my own hands. He was going to burn the memories of my children growing up. He was going to burn 40 years of my life to pay for his gambling debts. I looked around my bedroom. I looked at the photos on the dresser. I looked at the crown molding I had installed myself. He thinks this house is just wood and brick, I whispered. He does not know I put my soul into these walls. And souls do not burn. Dad, Marcus said, urgency returning to his voice. We have enough evidence now. We can move in. I can get a SWAT team there in 20 minutes. No, I said, cutting him off. Dad, he is going to kill you. No, I repeated firmly. If you come in now, he will claim he was coerced. He will claim he did not know about the poison. He has good lawyers. He will plead down. He will get 5 years and be out in 2. And the cartel will disappear into the shadows. I gripped the phone tight. I want them all, Marcus. I want Vega. I want the chemical company executives. I want Brent. I want them caught in the act. I want them holding the match. But 48 hours, Dad, Marcus pleaded. That is too risky. I am an engineer, Marcus, I said. I manage risk for a living. You handle the legal side. You get your team ready for Saturday night, but leave the house to me. I hung up. I put the satellite phone back in the Bible. I slid the Bible back onto the nightstand. 48 hours. I stood up. I took off my pajamas and put on my work clothes, dark trousers, a thick flannel shirt, soft-soled boots. I opened my bedroom door. The hallway was empty. The guard downstairs was snoring. Brent had gone to bed. It was time to go to work. I moved through the shadows like a ghost in my own home. I went to the linen closet and retrieved my tool bag. It was hidden behind the winter blankets. I had my wrench, my screwdrivers, my voltage tester. I went to the basement first. The furnace room was dark and smelled of dust. I shone my flashlight on the main gas line. It was a yellow pipe running along the ceiling, feeding the furnace, the water heater, and the stove upstairs. Brent's plan relied on a leak. He was probably planning to loosen the coupling nut on the main valve just enough to fill the basement with gas, then use a timer or a spark to ignite it. I looked at the pipe. I ran my hand along the cold metal. I am not going to stop the leak, I whispered. I am going to redirect it. I reached into my tool bag and pulled out a bypass valve I had saved from an old job. I worked quickly and silently. I cut the feed to the main house, but I installed a diverter. If Brent tried to flood the house with gas, the pressure would trigger the diverter. Instead of filling the open air of the basement where it would explode, the gas would be shunted into the reinforced ventilation shaft that led directly to the panic room. I smiled in the dark. The panic room. It was a steel, reinforced chamber I had built behind the wine cellar. It was designed to withstand a tornado. It had its own air filtration system. I walked over to the panic room door. It was heavy, solid steel. I examined the locking mechanism. It was designed to be locked from the inside for safety. I took out my screwdriver. I removed the faceplate of the lock. I reversed the tumblers. It was a delicate operation requiring a steady hand that my fake tremors would never allow. But down here in the dark, my hands were as steady as stone. I reassembled the lock. Now the door would not lock from the inside. It would lock from the outside. Once it clicked shut, it would seal hermetically. And if the gas diverter was triggered, the panic room would become a gas chamber. Not lethal. I wasn't a murderer. I had modified the mix. It would be enough to knock a man unconscious in 30 seconds, but it wouldn't kill him. It would just keep him very still for the police. I wiped my prints off the door. One trap set. I moved upstairs. I went to the terrace. The large stone balcony off the study where Brent liked to stand and smoke his cigars while he looked out over the property he thought he owned. The railing was made of wrought iron, heavy, ornate. It was bolted into the limestone facade with 4-inch lag screws. I knelt down. I took my wrench. I did not remove the screws. That would be too obvious. I loosened them. Just 3 turns. Enough to look solid. Enough to hold the weight of a leaning man for a second. But if he pushed against it, if he leaned back with the arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable, the yield point would be compromised. It wouldn't kill him. It was only a 10-foot drop to the soft grass below, but it would break his legs, it would shatter his dignity, and it would keep him from running when the FBI kicked down the door. I tightened the screws back just a fraction. Calibration is everything. 2 traps set. I went back inside. I walked through the living room. I looked at the chandelier, the heavy crystal fixture that hung directly above the spot where Brent liked to hold court. I looked at the winch cable that held it in place. I couldn't sabotage that. That was too dangerous for the guests. But I could sabotage the floor. There was a loose floorboard near the fireplace. I had been meaning to fix it for years. I pried it up gently. Underneath ran the main power cable for the security system. I stripped a small section of the insulation. I bridged it with a low-voltage tripwire connected to the pressure plate of the floorboard. If someone stepped on that board, specifically someone heavy pacing back and forth like a nervous criminal, it would short-circuit the entire security grid. The cameras would go dark. The magnetic locks on the doors would release. It was a back door for the FBI. When Marcus gave the signal, all I had to do was step on the board. The house would go dark, and his team could breach without resistance. 3 traps set. I packed up my tools. I was sweating. My back was screaming in protest, but my mind was clear. I walked back to my bedroom. I passed the guest room where Viola was sleeping. I stopped outside her door. I wondered if she knew. Did she know about the fire? Did she know she was supposed to be a grieving widow? Or was she expendable too? I realized it didn't matter. She had made her choice when she handed me the poison pills. She had chosen the side of the destroyers. I went back to my room and hid the tool bag. I lay down on the bed. The sun was starting to creep through the curtains, a gray dawn for a gray day. I had 48 hours to play the role of a lifetime. I had to be frail. I had to be confused. I had to be the sheep being led to the slaughter. But under the skin of the sheep, the wolf was waiting. I closed my eyes. I visualized the house, my house. I saw the gas lines, the electrical wires, the structural beams. It was no longer a home. It was a machine I had rewired to dispense justice. Brent wanted a fire. I was going to give him an inferno. But he wasn't going to be the one holding the match. He was going to be the fuel. The sky over Oak Park was the color of a bruise. It was Friday evening, 24 hours before the party that was scheduled to be my funeral. The house was buzzing with activity. Caterers were bringing in tables. Florists were arranging lilies, the flowers of mourning disguised as celebration. Brent was in the study shouting orders into his phone. Layla was upstairs trying on dresses. But I was looking for Viola. I found her in the backyard, standing by the trellis. The wind was picking up swirling dead leaves around her ankles. She was wearing a heavy cardigan, wrapping it tight around herself as if to keep the cold out. But the cold was not coming from the wind. It was coming from inside the house. I watched her for a moment through the kitchen window. She was staring at the rose bushes, the ones she had planted 40 years ago. They were brown and withered now, neglected for months while she chased the phantom of a better life. I opened the back door. The screen door creaked. Viola turned. When she saw me, her face hardened. She did not smile. She did not ask how I was feeling. She just looked at me like I was a weed that had sprouted in her pristine lawn. "Hello, Thaddeus," she said. "You should be inside resting. Tomorrow is a big day." I stepped onto the patio. I shuffled my feet, keeping up the act, but inside my mind was clear. I needed to know. I needed to look her in the eye one last time before I pulled the trigger on the plan that would destroy her world. I needed to see if there was any of the woman I married left inside that shell of greed. I walked over to her. I stood next to her looking at the dead thorns. "Viola," I said softly, "do you remember the day we bought this house? It was 1982. You were wearing that yellow sundress." She looked away, staring at the fence. "I remember," she said flatly. "It rained." "It rained," I agreed. "But you didn't care. You stood right here in the mud and you pointed to this spot. You said, 'Thaddeus, build me a trellis. I want to grow roses. I want something beautiful that lasts.' I reached out and touched a brittle stem. It snapped under my finger. We were happy then, Viola," I whispered. "We didn't have much money. I was working double shifts. You were teaching piano. But we were happy." Viola let out a short, bitter laugh. "You were happy, Thaddeus," she said. "You were happy coming home covered in dirt and eating meatloaf. You were happy with your little life." I turned to look at her. The venom in her voice shocked me. "My little life?" I asked. "I gave you everything, Viola. I built this life for you. You gave me a cage," she snapped, turning to face me. Her eyes were blazing. "You gave me a house in the suburbs and 40 years of boredom. You gave me a husband who was always too tired or too busy drawing blueprints to take me anywhere. When was the last time we traveled, Thaddeus? When was the last time we saw the world?" "We went to Florida 3 years ago," I said. "Florida," she spat the word like it was a curse. "Brent talks about Paris. He talks about Rome. He talks about villas in Tuscany." "Brent talks a lot, Viola," I said, dropping my voice. "But talk is cheap." "He is going to take us there," she said, her voice rising. "Tomorrow night after the deal closes, he is taking us to Paris. First class. He promised me Thaddeus. He said I deserve it. He said I have suffered enough." Suffered. She lived in a 6-bedroom house. She drove a Lexus. She had never missed a meal in her life. "And what about me, Viola?" I asked. "Do I go to Paris too?" The silence that followed was heavy. It hung between us like a guillotine blade. Viola looked at me. She looked at my gray hair. She looked at the wrinkles on my face. She looked at the hands that had worked for 50 years to support her. And in her eyes I saw the truth. It was a cold, calculating look. The look of a woman estimating the value of a discarded object. "You are tired, Thaddeus," she said quietly. "You are sick. The doctor said your heart is failing. My heart is failing because you are poisoning it," I wanted to scream. But I stayed silent. "Silver Oaks is a nice place," she continued. "They will take care of you. You can rest there. You won't be a burden anymore." "A burden? Is that what I am to you, Viola?" I asked. "A burden." She sighed. It was a long, weary sound. "Yes," she whispered. "You are. You are heavy, Thaddeus. You are an anchor. You are holding us back. You are holding Layla back. You are holding me back." She stepped closer to me. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "Why do not you just let go, Thaddeus? Why do you have to fight everything? Just let go. Take your pills. Go to sleep. Let us live." I looked at her. I really looked at her. And then I realized something. Something Marcus hadn't told me. Something the files hadn't shown me. It wasn't just about the land. The land deal was Brent S.'s desperate play to pay off the cartel. But $12 million goes fast when you owe 10. There wouldn't be much left for Paris. Not enough for the lifestyle Viola wanted. Unless there was more money. I thought about my life insurance policy. I had taken it out 20 years ago. A platinum policy. $5 million. Double indemnity for accidental death. I had paid the premiums faithfully every month. If I went to Silver Oaks, she got nothing. But if I died of a sudden heart attack, or if I died in a tragic house fire, she gets $5 million. Tax-free. The realization hit me harder than the wrench I had held in the basement. She wasn't being tricked by Brent. She wasn't a passive accomplice. She was an investor. She was trading my life for $5 million and a ticket to Paris. Brent needed the land money to save his life. Viola needed the insurance money to change hers. They were partners. He provided the method. She provided the victim. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the weather. The last ember of love I held for this woman flickered and died. It turned to ash right there in the garden. "I see," I said softly. "I see everything now, Viola." "What do you see?" she asked, suspicious of my tone. "I see the roses," I said, gesturing to the dead bushes. "You were right. They are dead. The roots are rotten. There is no saving them." I pulled my coat tighter around me. "I am cold," I said. "I am going inside." I turned to walk away. "Thaddeus," she called after me. I stopped. I did not turn around. "Make sure you take your medicine tonight," she said. "We want you strong for the party." I stood there for a second. The audacity of evil is that it often sounds like kindness. "I will, Viola," I said. "I will take exactly what I deserve." I walked back into the house. I walked past the kitchen where the caterers were prepping. I walked past the study where Brent was laughing on the phone. I went to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were not shaking anymore. I picked up the picture frame on my nightstand. It was a photo of me and Viola on our wedding day. She looked so innocent. I looked so proud. I took the photo out of the frame. I looked at it for a long time. Then I ripped it in half. I dropped the pieces into the trash can. I picked up my burner phone. I sent a text to Marcus. "Hostile number 2 confirmed. She is not a civilian. She is an enemy combatant. Proceed with full demolition." Marcus replied instantly. "Copy that, Dad. I am sorry. Do not be." I typed back. "Better to know the truth than to live a lie. We close the deal tomorrow." I put the phone away. I lay down on the bed. I stared at the ceiling. I thought about Paris. I had always wanted to take her there. I had a savings account for it. A secret account she didn't know about. I was going to surprise her for our 50th anniversary. But we wouldn't make it to 50. We wouldn't make it to Sunday. Tomorrow night the house would be full of people. The champagne would flow. The contracts would be signed. And Viola would be wearing her best dress waiting for her husband to die. She wanted a tragedy. She wanted a show. Well, I was an engineer. I knew how to build a spectacle. I closed my eyes. "Goodbye, Viola." I whispered to the empty room. "I hope Paris is worth it. Because the price of the ticket is going to be your soul." The tuxedo didn't fit right. It was my old tuxedo, the one I wore to the engineering gala 10 years ago, but I had lost weight in the last week. The stress of living with assassins had carved 10 pounds off my frame, so the jacket hung loose on my shoulders. I looked in the mirror, and I didn't see a birthday boy. I saw a corpse that had been dressed up for an open casket viewing. Brent stood behind me, adjusting my bow tie. His hands were sweating. I could feel the dampness through the silk. He was humming a tune, some pop song about winning, but his eyes in the reflection were darting around the room like trapped birds. "You look sharp, Pop," he said, tightening the tie until it pinched my windpipe. "A real statesman. The guests are going to love you." He didn't mention that the guests were mostly strangers. He didn't mention that half of them were criminals and the other half were corporate lawyers waiting to sign a death warrant for the city's water supply. I stood up, reaching for my cane. "Sit down," Brent snapped, pushing me back onto the bed. He walked to the corner of the room and wheeled out a chair. It was a wheelchair. A heavy chrome and black leather contraption that looked like a medical device from a horror movie. "I do not need that," I said, my voice raspy. "I can walk." "Not tonight, you can't," Brent said, pushing the chair in front of me. "Tonight you are frail. Remember, you are the beloved patriarch in his twilight years. If you walk out there looking strong, Vega might get nervous. He might think you are competent enough to read the fine print. And we cannot have that." He locked the brakes. "Get in, Pop. Do not make me force you." I looked at him. I looked at the man who was going to try to kill me in less than 3 hours. I sat in the chair. It felt like surrendering. It felt like admitting defeat. But I knew that in war, sometimes you have to play dead to let the enemy get close enough to stab. Brent smiled. A wide, toothy grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Perfect," he said. "You look pathetic. Just the way I need you." He unlocked the brakes and wheeled me out of the bedroom. We moved down the hallway toward the top of the grand staircase. Below us, the house was alive. The foyer was filled with people. The chandeliers were blazing, casting prisms of light onto the marble floor. A string quartet was playing Mozart in the corner. Waiters in white jackets were weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne and caviar. It was a beautiful party. It was the kind of party Viola had always dreamed of hosting. And it was all a lie. Viola was standing at the bottom of the stairs greeting guests. She was wearing a silver gown that sparkled under the lights. She looked radiant from a distance. But as Brent wheeled me closer to the railing, I could see the tension in her neck. I could see the way her hands clutched her clutch purse until her knuckles were white. She kept glancing at the grandfather clock. She was counting down the minutes. Not until the cake cutting, but until the widowhood. "Ready for your big entrance," Pop Brent whispered. He pushed me to the top of the stairs. He stopped. He raised his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, his voice projecting over the music. The room went silent. The music stopped. Every face turned upward. "Please welcome the man of the hour, the builder of this home, the legend himself, Mr. Thaddeus Moore." Applause erupted. It was polite applause, respectful applause. Brent tilted the wheelchair back and began to lower me down the stairs one step at a time. It was a precarious, terrifying descent. I gripped the armrest, my knuckles white. I wasn't acting this time. If he slipped, if he let go, I would tumble down 20 marble steps and break my neck. Maybe that was plan B, but he held on. He maneuvered me down with the care of a man transporting a bomb. When we reached the bottom, Viola rushed over. She kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. "Happy birthday, Thaddeus," she whispered. "You look rested." I looked at her. "Thank you, Viola," I said, my voice weak and shaking. "It is a lovely party." Brent spun my chair around facing the crowd. "Thank you all for coming," he announced. "Tonight is not just a celebration of 72 years. It is a celebration of legacy. It is a celebration of the future." He gestured to a group of men standing near the library doors. Mr. Vega was there. He was wearing a new suit, but he still looked like a thug. Next to him stood 3 men in gray suits holding briefcases, the lawyers from Vertigo Industries. They nodded at me. It wasn't a greeting, it was an appraisal. They were checking the merchandise. Brent wheeled me into the crowd. People came up to shake my hand, neighbors I hadn't seen in years, former colleagues from the city planning department. They looked at me with pity. They spoke loudly and slowly, as if I was deaf or stupid. "How are you doing?" Thaddeus, one neighbor asked. "I am hanging in there," I mumbled, letting my head loll to the side. "Just hanging in there." Brent stayed right behind me, his hands never leaving the handles of the wheelchair. He was my jailer. He steered me away from anyone who might ask a real question. He steered me toward the bar. He leaned down close to my ear. His breath was hot and smelled of scotch. "You are doing great, Pop," he whispered. "Just keep it up. Another hour." He paused. He looked around to make sure no one was listening. Then he said the words that sealed his fate. "Take a good look around," he hissed. "Drink the expensive champagne. Eat the lobster. Tauten your senses, old man. Because this is the Last Supper. By midnight, you will be history." I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't fear, it was clarity. He really believed it. He really believed he was going to win. He patted my shoulder and straightened up, smiling at a passing guest. "I need a drink," I said, my voice sounding frail. "My throat is dry." "Of course," Brent said. "Waiter." He snapped his fingers. A waiter appeared from the crowd. He was young, with dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He was holding a tray of champagne flutes. He walked over to us. He didn't look at Brent. He looked at me. "Champagne, sir?" the waiter asked. I looked at his name tag. It said Kevin. But I knew his name wasn't Kevin. Marcus had shown me his file. His name was Agent Rodriguez. He was the sniper on Marcus S. team. I reached out with my shaking right hand. I grabbed a glass. But I didn't take it. I let my hand spasm. The glass tipped. Champagne spilled onto the tray. "Oh, I am so sorry," I stammered. "I am so clumsy." The waiter didn't flinch. He stabilized the tray with one hand and reached out to steady my hand with the other. "It is quite all right, sir," he said smoothly. "Accidents happen." As he wiped the spill with a napkin, he leaned in slightly. It looked like he was just cleaning the chair arm, but his eyes locked onto mine. He tapped his index finger twice on the tray. Tap, tap. The signal. "We are in position. The perimeter is secure." I looked at him. I gave him a slow, deliberate wink. "I am ready." The waiter nodded imperceptibly. He stood up. "Let me get you a fresh glass, sir," he said. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Brent hadn't noticed. He was too busy waving at Mr. Vega across the room. "Who was that?" Brent asked distractedly. "Just a nice young man," I mumbled, sipping the drink. "Very polite." Brent laughed. "Yeah, well, do not get used to the service." He checked his watch. 9 o'clock, Pop," he said. "Time for business. The investors are waiting in the study. Let's go sign those papers so you can go to bed." Go to bed. He meant go to the grave. He spun the wheelchair around. We moved through the crowd. The music seemed to get louder. The laughter seemed more shrill. We approached the study doors. The guards were standing there, arms crossed. They opened the double mahogany doors for us. I looked inside. The study had been transformed. The computer monitors were gone. In their place was a long table covered in documents. Mr. Vega was sitting at one end. The lawyers were sitting at the other. It looked like a tribunal. Brent wheeled me to the head of the table. "Gentlemen," Brent said, closing the doors behind us, "the guest of honor has arrived." The room was quiet. The air was thick with tension. Vega looked at me. He placed the satellite phone on the table. The dummy phone. "Shall we begin?" Vega asked. "I have a plane to catch." Brent locked the wheels of my chair. "We are ready," he said. He walked around to the side of the table and picked up a pen. He looked at me. His eyes were shining with a manic light. "This is it, Pop," he said. "Just one signature. And then, peace." I looked at the pen. I looked at the contract. I looked at the window where the terrace railing was loosened. I looked at the floorboard near the fireplace where the tripwire was hidden. I took a deep breath. "I am ready, son," I said. But I wasn't reaching for the pen. I was reaching for the trigger. Brent turned to Vega. "Do you have the payment confirmation?" he asked. Vega nodded. He tapped the dummy phone. "Transfer initiated. 12 million. It will clear as soon as the deed is recorded." "Excellent," Brent said. He turned to the lawyers. "Give him the deed." One of the suits slid a thick document toward me. "Sign at the bottom, Mr. Moore," he said. "Press hard. It is a triplicate carbon." I picked up the pen. My hand shook. Brent leaned over me. "Right there, Pop. On the line." I touched the pen to the paper, but then I stopped. I looked up at Brent. "I need my glasses," I said. "I cannot see the line." Brent sighed, frustrated. "Where are they?" he snapped. "I think I left them in the kitchen," I said. "Or maybe the bedroom, Viola knows." Brent groaned. I will go get them, he said. Do not move. He turned to the door. Wait, I said. He turned back. What? I need to use the bathroom first, I said. All this champagne. Brent looked at Vega. Vega looked annoyed. Make it quick, Vega growled. Brent grabbed the handles of the wheelchair. Fine, he said. I will take you to the powder room. Then I will get your glasses. Then we sign. And then this farce is over. He wheeled me out of the study. As we entered the hallway, I looked at the waiter again. Kevin. He was standing by the kitchen door. He saw us coming. He reached into his jacket pocket. I knew what he was reaching for. Not a gun. A phone. He was texting Marcus. Target is on the move. Phase 2 initiated. Brent wheeled me into the small bathroom under the stairs. Hurry up, he said, leaving the door slightly ajar. I will be right outside. I stood up from the wheelchair. I looked in the mirror. The old man stared back, but the fear was gone. I flushed the toilet. I ran the tap. I wasn't using the bathroom. I was checking my own wire. I tapped the button on my cardigan. Testing, I whispered. Testing. 1, 2, 3. A voice crackled in my ear. A tiny microscopic speaker deep in my ear canal. Loud and clear, Dad Marcus's voice said, "We are with you." I smiled. "Showtime," I whispered. I opened the door. I sat back in the wheelchair. "Ready?" Brent asked. "Ready," I said. He pushed me toward the stairs. "I am going to leave you here for a second," he said, parking me near the kitchen. "I have to go down to the basement." The basement. My heart skipped a beat. Why, I asked, innocent. I have to check the breaker panel," Brent lied. The lights flickered. "I do not want a blackout during the signing. He was going to rig the gas. He was going to set the timer." "Okay, son," I said. "Be careful." He patted my head. "Always am, Pop." He opened the basement door and disappeared into the darkness. I watched the door close. I waited 5 seconds. Then I stood up. I kicked the wheelchair away. It rolled across the floor and crashed into a table of hors d'oeuvres. Guests gasped. But I didn't care. I walked to the basement door. I locked it. Then I turned to the waiter. "Now," I said. Kevin pulled out his earpiece. "Go, go, go," he shouted. And then the front doors exploded. The chandelier above me cost more than my father made in his entire lifetime. Its crystals caught the light of 1,000 bulbs, scattering rainbows across a room filled with people who would sell their own mothers for a percentage point of profit. I sat there anchored in a wheelchair. I did not need my hands folded deliberately in my lap. To the casual observer, to the sharks circling with flutes of champagne in their manicured hands, I was exactly what Brent wanted me to be. I was the relic, the fading patriarch, the silent ghost at his own funeral feast. My legs felt strong. Just that morning, before the sunrise had even touched the horizon, I had done my calisthenics in the privacy of the guest room, careful not to make a sound on the floorboards. My mind was sharper than the razor I used to shave the gray stubble from my chin, but tonight I had to play the role of the invalid. It was the hardest acting job of my life, requiring a discipline that burned in my gut like swallowed coal. Brent stood behind me, his hands resting on the handles of the wheelchair. I could feel the heat of his palms, a possessive, suffocating weight. He was guiding me through the crowd, not to help me navigate, but to parade his trophy. See, his posture seemed to say, "I am the benevolent son-in-law taking care of the senile old man." Isn't it tragic? Isn't it noble of me to shoulder this burden? We moved through the sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfumed truffle oil and the metallic tang of ambition. Every few feet we stopped. Brent would flash that winning smile, the one that had charmed my daughter 5 years ago, the one that had fooled me for at least 3. "This is Thaddeus," he would say, his voice dropping to a somber, respectful register. "He is having a good day today. We are just so grateful he could be here to see the transition." The guests would nod sympathetically, casting pitying glances at me. They looked at my hands, waiting for a tremor. They looked at my eyes, searching for a vacancy. I gave them exactly what they expected. I let my gaze drift slightly out of focus. I let my mouth hang open just a fraction of an inch. I didn't say a word. Silence, I had learned over these agonizing months, was a weapon that opponents never saw coming until it cut them. Inside, however, I was cataloging everything. I noted who avoided my eyes, the ones who knew about the embezzlement and were too cowardly to speak. I noted who looked too eager to shake Brent's hand, the accomplices who were waiting for their cut of my life's work. And I noted the security detail. They were stationed at every exit, thick-necked men in earpieces who weren't there to protect the guests, but to ensure that the old man didn't cause a scene. Brent leaned down, his face close to my ear. To the room, it looked like a tender moment between family members. A loving reassurance. "Smile, old man," he whispered. The venom in his voice was so casual, so practiced. "You are depressing the investors." I slowly turned my head to look at him. I blinked once, slowly, like a tortoise. "That is it," Brent murmured, tightening his grip on the wheelchair handles until his knuckles turned white. "Just sit there and look fragile. By the time the dessert is served, the papers will be signed, and you will be on your way to that lovely facility in the mountains. No reception, no visitors, just fresh air and silence. You will love it." He pushed me forward again towards the head table. "Enjoy it, Thaddeus," he hissed, the breath hot against my neck. "This is your last supper." My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a surge of adrenaline that I hadn't felt since I was a young man closing my first major deal. He thought this was the end. He thought the game was over. He didn't realize that we were only just setting up the board. He parked me at the end of the long table, positioning me like a piece of furniture. Then he walked to the center, taking the microphone. The room fell silent. All eyes were on him. He looked magnificent in his bespoke suit, the picture of modern success. He began to speak about legacy, about the future, about the heavy responsibility of taking the helm. I tuned him out. My attention shifted to the service entrance. A waiter emerged carrying a silver tray laden with fresh glasses of water. He moved with a fluidity that didn't belong to a catering staff. His uniform was identical to the others, but his eyes were different. They were alert, scanning the room, not for empty glasses, but for threats. He made his way down the line of tables, weaving through the seated guests. As he approached my spot, time seemed to slow down. This was the moment. The weeks of secret phone calls, the encrypted messages, passed through my old attorney, the covert meetings in the park, while I was supposedly feeding pigeons, it all culminated in this single, silent exchange. The waiter stopped beside me. He placed a glass of water on the table with a precise, deliberate click. "Sparkling or still, sir?" he asked. The question was the code. "Still," I replied, my voice raspy but clear. "Like the water in the lake." It was a nonsensical phrase to anyone else, but to him it was the confirmation. It meant, "I am ready, the trap is set. Proceed." The waiter gave a microscopic nod. As he straightened up, his hand brushed against the tablecloth near my right hand. When he pulled away, a small black object no larger than a button was stuck to the underside of the table rim. A listening device. "Enjoy your evening, sir," the waiter said and moved on. I watched him go. That was Marcus, the lead agent from the Specialized Fraud Division. He wasn't just a waiter. He was the spearhead of a federal investigation that had been building a case against Brent for months. They didn't just want him for elder abuse or theft. They wanted him for the massive money laundering scheme he was running through my company's accounts. Brent thought he was stealing my money. In reality, he was washing dirty cash for a cartel, thinking I was too senile to notice the discrepancies in the ledgers. But I had noticed. I had noticed everything. Brent was finishing his speech now, raising his glass for a toast. To Thaddeus, he bellowed, feigning emotion. "The giant whose shoulders we stand upon." "Hear, hear," the crowd roared. I reached for my water glass. My hand did not shake. I took a sip, the cool liquid soothing my dry throat. As I lowered the glass, I looked directly at Brent. For the first time all night, I dropped the mask, just for a second. I let the vacancy leave my eyes. I let the confusion vanish. I stared at him with the cold, hard intensity of the man who had built this empire from dirt and grit. I locked eyes with him and let a small, genuine smile touch my lips. Not a senile smile, a wolf's smile. Brent paused. He saw it. I saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes, the sudden hesitation. He blinked, looking at me again, trying to process what he had just seen. But I was already gone back to staring blankly at the floral centerpiece. He must have thought it was a trick of the light. He shook his head slightly, dismissing the moment, and drank his champagne. "Go ahead," I thought. "Drink. Celebrate. You have absolutely no idea what is coming through those doors in less than an hour." The waiters began to serve the first course. It was a symphony of excess. Caviar, lobster, gold leaf. I sat there breaking a breadstick into small pieces, the crumbs falling onto my napkin. The woman next to me, the wife of a banker I had never liked, leaned in. "It is so brave of you to be here," she cooed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Brent is such a saint for taking care of you." I looked at her. I looked at the diamond necklace choking her neck. "Yes," I said softly. "He is full of surprises." She didn't hear the irony. She just patted my hand and turned away to gossip with her neighbor. Under the table, I tapped my foot rhythmically. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It was a grounding exercise. I needed to stay calm. The anger was rising again, a hot tide threatening to break my composure. I thought about my daughter, Sarah. She wasn't here tonight. Brent had told her I wasn't feeling well enough for her to visit, isolating her from me, just as he had isolated me from my accounts. He had convinced her that I was dangerous, that I was losing my mind. That was his biggest mistake. You can steal a man's money. You can take his house. But when you try to turn his own child against him, you cross a line from which there is no return. I looked across the room and saw the waiter Marcus standing near the kitchen doors. He checked his watch. He caught my eye and held up 3 fingers, scratching his nose. 3 minutes. 3 minutes until the heavy oak doors at the front of the hall would swing open. 3 minutes until the music stopped. 3 minutes until Brent's carefully constructed world of lies crumbled into dust. I looked at my son-in-law one last time. He was laughing at a joke, his head thrown back, his throat exposed. He looked invincible. He looked like a king. I picked up my fork. "Enjoy your supper, Brent," I whispered to myself, the words lost in the din of the party. It is going to be a very long night. The applause for my son-in-law's speech was still echoing off the high ceilings of the ballroom, but the man himself was gone. He had slipped away moments ago, whispering to the guests that he had a special surprise to prepare in the wine cellar, a vintage bottle to celebrate his total takeover of the company. He thought he was walking toward his victory lap. In reality, he had just walked into a steel cage of his own making. I sat there in my wheelchair, the chrome handles cold against my palms. The room was buzzing with the low hum of expensive conversation. People were drinking my champagne, eating my food, and discussing my demise as if I were already a tombstone in the ground. They looked at me with that familiar mix of pity and dismissal. To them, I was just furniture. I was the old man who drooled a little, the checkbook with a pulse. It was time. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of lilies and betrayal. I placed my hands firmly on the armrests of the wheelchair. I didn't tremble. I didn't hesitate. I pushed down, engaging the muscles in my arms, my back and my legs muscles that I had secretly trained every morning while the house slept. The movement caught the eye of the banker's wife next to me first. She gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. The sound was like a pebble dropped in a pond, sending ripples of silence through the crowd. I stood up. I didn't just stand. I rose. I straightened my spine until I was towering over the table, regaining the 6 feet of height that age and deception had tried to steal from me. I adjusted my tuxedo jacket, buttoning it with steady fingers. The silence in the room was now absolute. It was a physical weight pressing against the eardrums. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. You could hear the sudden sharp intake of breath from the board members who had signed the papers to oust me only hours ago. I stepped away from the wheelchair. I didn't look back at it. It was a cocoon I had outgrown, a prison I had broken. I walked toward the stage. My stride was long and purposeful. The rhythmic tap of my dress shoes on the marble floor was a drumbeat of war. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea, their faces pale, their eyes wide with confusion and a dawning, terrible fear. They were realizing that the lion they thought was toothless had just woken up. I climbed the stairs to the stage, moving with a vigor that contradicted every medical report Brent had forged in my name. I walked to the microphone stand, the one Brent had just used to announce his triumph. I gripped it. The feedback whine was a sharp screech that made everyone flinch. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I said. My voice was not the raspy whisper they were used to. It was a baritone rumble, deep and commanding, the voice that had built skyscrapers and negotiated treaties. It was the voice of the CEO, not the patient. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the lawyers sweating. I saw the loyal friends looking for the exit. My son-in-law, Brent, has a special gift he wanted to share with you. I continued, my tone conversational, almost pleasant. He went down to the secure vault in the basement to retrieve it, but I think he is having a little trouble. Why don't we check on him? I pulled a small remote control from my pocket and pointed it at the massive projection screen behind me, the one that had been displaying photos of my glory days as a tribute to my retirement. The screen flickered. The nostalgic photos vanished. In their place, a high-definition live feed appeared. The image was stark lit by the harsh red emergency lights of the panic room in the basement. This was a room built for security designed to withstand a bomb blast. But tonight, it was a theater of judgment. On the screen, Brent was not the composed, arrogant man who had stood on this stage 5 minutes ago. He was an animal in a trap. He had shed his jacket. His tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck like a noose. He was sweating profusely, his hair plastered to his forehead. He was pounding on the heavy steel door of the vault with both fists. We couldn't hear the pounding in the room because the soundproofing was too good, but we could see the desperation in his eyes. He turned to the camera, his face distorted by terror. I pressed a button on the remote, and the audio from the panic room flooded the ballroom speakers. "Open the door!" Brent screamed, his voice cracking. "It's hot. Why is it so hot? The ventilation is off. I can't breathe." There was no fire, of course. I had simply instructed Marcus to crank the thermostat in that sealed room up to 90 degrees and pump in a little harmless, odorless smoke machine vapor. But to a guilty conscience, it felt like the fires of hell were licking at his heels. Brent fell to his knees on the screen, clawing at his throat. He looked directly into the security camera lens, his eyes wild. He thought he was talking to his accomplices, to the security team he had bribed. He didn't know he was talking to the entire city's elite. "Help me!" he shrieked. "You can't leave me here! We had a deal!" He scrambled backward as a puff of theatrical smoke drifted from the vents. He coughed a wet, hacking sound that amplified through the silent ballroom. "Viola," he screamed. A gasp went through the room. Viola was my head housekeeper, a woman who had worked for me for 20 years, a woman I had treated like a sister. She was standing near the kitchen doors, dropping a tray of champagne flutes. The crash of breaking glass was the only sound in the room besides Brent's voice. "Where is that old woman, Viola?" Brent yelled at the camera, tears streaming down his face mixed with sweat. "She promised me. She said she put the poison in the old man's soup at lunch. She said he would be dead before the speeches started." The confession hung in the air, heavy and toxic. I watched the faces of the guests. They were frozen in horror. They looked from the screen to me standing alive and well on the stage. The realization hit them with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just a corporate takeover. This was attempted murder. On the screen, Brent was unraveling completely. He was sobbing now, curled into a fetal position on the floor of the vault. "I paid her $50,000, he wailed, his dignity completely gone. "I paid the doctor to fake the dementia reports. It's all mine. The company is mine. Just let me out. I don't want to burn." I looked down at the crowd. I found Viola's eyes. She was trembling, backed against the wall, trapped by the gazes of 100 witnesses. 2 of the waiters, undercover agents from Marcus's team, stepped quietly to her side, gripping her arms. I looked back at the screen. Brent was now bargaining with God or perhaps the devil. "I'll give it back," he whimpered. "I'll give the money back. Just open the door." I leaned into the microphone one last time. "The show is over, Brent," I said calmly. My voice was carried down to the speakers in the panic room. On the screen, I saw Brent freeze. He looked up, confusion warring with his terror. He recognized the voice. He realized in that split second that the senile old man was the one holding the remote control. The room erupted, not with applause, but with the chaotic noise of reality crashing in. People were shouting. Some were crying. Police officers who had been waiting in the wings, disguised as event staff, began to move through the crowd, securing the exits. I stood there watching the chaos with the detachment of a general overlooking a battlefield. I had cut out the rot. I had exposed the infection. It was brutal, yes. It was ruthless. But as I looked at the image of the man who had tried to erase my existence shivering on the floor of my basement, I felt a profound sense of peace. I turned my back on the audience, on the weeping housekeeper, and on the screaming man on the screen. I walked off the stage, my steps steady and strong. I had a company to rebuild. I had a family to purge. And for the first time in a long time, the path ahead was perfectly clear. The silence in the ballroom was of a different quality now. Before it had been the hushed reverence of a crowd listening to a king. Now it was the terrified stillness of a herd that realizes the wolves are among them. The giant screen behind me had gone black, cutting off Brent's pathetic sobbing, but his confession still hung in the air like smoke. Every word he had screamed in that panic room was echoing in the minds of the 200 guests. Poison, forgery, murder. I did not look at the crowd. I did not look at the police officers who were now quietly moving in from the periphery, their hands resting on their holsters. My entire world, my entire focus narrowed down to one single point in the room: Viola. She was standing near the buffet table, a place of honor I had given her for years. She wasn't just a housekeeper to me. After my wife died, Viola had become the matriarch of the estate. She had raised my daughter. She had nursed me through the flu. She had organized my life. I had trusted her with the keys to every door in my house and, more importantly, the keys to my vulnerability. And she had sold me out for $50,000 and a plane ticket. She looked small now. The arrogance that usually defined her posture, that stiff-backed superiority she wore like a uniform, had evaporated. She was clutching her clutch bag so tightly that I could see the tendons in her aging hands straining against the skin. Her face was a mask of ashen gray. She looked left, then right, but the guests around her were stepping back. It was a physical wave of repulsion. The banker's wife, who had been chatting with her minutes ago, was now pressing herself against the wall, shielding her jewelry, looking at Viola as if she were a contagious disease. I gripped the microphone stand. I felt powerful. I felt the surge of adrenaline that comes when the final card is played and the table is swept clean. I leaned forward, my voice booming through the speakers, cutting through the thick tension. "You look pale, Viola," I said. She flinched. Her head snapped up, her eyes meeting mine. There was no remorse in them, only fear. And beneath the fear, a simmering, ugly anger that she had been caught. I continued, my voice dropping to a conversational, almost gentle tone that made the words cut deeper. "Brent tells me you had plans. Expensive plans." I let the silence stretch for a beat. I wanted her to feel the weight of every eye in the room. "You want Paris? Do you not, Viola?" I asked, letting a dark chuckle escape my lips. "I remember you telling me once while you were bringing me my evening tea, the tea you probably spat in, that you wanted to retire to a little apartment in the Marais. You wanted to drink wine and eat cheese and forget about the old man you had to clean up after." Viola's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She took a stumbling step back, bumping into a waiter who recoiled from her touch. I shook my head, feigning disappointment. "I think you will find the accommodations in the state penitentiary to be lacking in French charm," I said coldly. "The menu is certainly less refined, and I doubt they serve vintage Bordeaux with the prison loaf." The brutality of the statement sent a shiver through the room. But I wasn't done. I needed to expose the rot completely. I needed to separate the malicious from the merely stupid. I shifted my gaze to the other woman standing near the front. My daughter. Layla. Layla was frozen. She was standing next to the empty spot where Brent had been. She looked like a child who had woken up in a burning house. Her face was streaked with tears, her makeup running in dark lines down her cheeks. But unlike Viola, her expression wasn't one of guilt. It was one of total, shattering shock. Layla was many things. She was spoiled. She was entitled. She was easily manipulated by a handsome face and a smooth tongue like Brent's. She had happily signed the papers to put me in a home because she wanted my money and she didn't want the burden of caring for me. That was greed. That was selfishness. But it wasn't murder. I watched her process what she had just heard. I saw her lips move silently, repeating the word Brent had screamed. Poison. She turned slowly to look at Viola. This was the woman who had braided her hair. This was the woman who had baked her birthday cakes. This was the woman Layla had defended against me 1,000 times, telling me I was too hard on her, that I didn't appreciate her. "Viola," Layla whispered. The sound was faint, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried like a scream. Viola didn't answer. She was looking for an exit. Her eyes were darting frantically toward the kitchen doors. "Did you—" Layla's voice broke, choking on the reality of it. "Did you try to kill my father?" The accusation hung there. Viola's face twisted. The mask of the loyal servant fell away completely, revealing the snarling face of a rat cornered in a trap. She realized there was no talking her way out of this. Brent had confessed. The evidence was irrefutable. Her retirement was gone. Her freedom was gone. And then she snapped. It wasn't a calculated move. It was a spasm of pure, unadulterated rage. She couldn't attack the police. She couldn't reach me on the stage, so she lashed out at the nearest symbol of her failure. She lunged, but But she didn't lunge for the door. She lunged for the microphone stand on the lower podium, perhaps to scream her defense, perhaps to curse us all. She moved with a speed that defied her age, a manic energy fueled by desperation. "He deserved it," Viola shrieked, her voice shrill and terrifying. "He's a miserable old miser. He sits on that money while we rot." She was rushing toward the stairs of the stage, her hands clawed, her eyes fixed on me with murderous intent. The crowd gasped, but they were too slow to react. But Layla wasn't. My daughter, the girl who had never done a day of hard labor in her life, the girl who I thought had no spine, moved. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She simply reacted to the threat against her father. As Viola scrambled past her, Layla threw herself forward. It wasn't a graceful tackle. It was a collision of bodies. Layla slammed into Viola, grabbing the older woman by the shoulders. They both went down hard onto the polished marble floor in a tangle of silk and velvet. No, Layla screamed a primal sound that I had never heard from her before. "You don't touch him." The room erupted into chaos. Glasses shattered as guests scrambled away from the brawl. I watched from my vantage point on the stage, gripping the armrests of my wheelchair. No, I was standing, I reminded myself. I was standing tall. On the floor, it was a vicious struggle. Viola was fighting dirty, scratching at Layla's face, pulling her hair. She was screaming obscenities, spewing years of repressed hatred. "I fed you, I raised you, you ungrateful brat," Viola yelled, slapping Layla across the face. But Layla held on. She wrapped her arms around Viola's waist, pinning her to the ground with her own body weight. She was sobbing hysterical, but she didn't let go. "He's my dad." Layla cried out, her voice raw. "You tried to kill my dad." That was the moment. That was the clarity I had been waiting for. In the midst of the violence, the truth distilled itself. Layla had been a bad daughter, yes, she had been greedy, but she had boundaries. There was a line she wouldn't cross, and seeing that line crossed by others had finally woken her up. Security guards and police officers swarmed in, then pulling the two women apart. It took 2 large officers to restrain Viola. She was spitting and kicking a wild animal in a dress suit. They dragged her up, handcuffing her hands behind her back. Layla was left sitting on the floor. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. Her hair was a mess. There was a scratch bleeding on her cheek. She looked up at me, her chest heaving. I looked down at her. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't see the greedy stranger Brent had turned her into. I saw my little girl. Broken, misguided, but mine. The officers began to march Viola toward the exit. She stopped fighting as the cold metal of the cuffs bit into her wrists. She looked back at me one last time. There was no more rage, just the hollow, empty look of a gambler who has lost everything on the last spin. "Take her away," I said into the microphone. My voice was calm, final. "And make sure she gets a window seat in the transport van. It's the only view she is going to have for the rest of her life." As they dragged her out, the heavy double doors swallowed her screams. The room fell silent again, save for the sound of Layla's soft weeping on the floor. I stepped away from the microphone. I walked down the stairs of the stage, one slow, deliberate step at a time. The crowd parted for me, giving me a wide berth. I didn't look at them. I walked straight to my daughter. I stood over her. She flinched, expecting anger. She expected me to banish her, to tell her she was cut off, to throw her to the wolves, just like I had done with Brent and Viola. But I didn't. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a clean white handkerchief. I slowly lowered myself, my knees protesting slightly but holding firm until I was kneeling beside her on the floor. I reached out and gently wiped the blood from the scratch on her cheek. She looked at me, her eyes wide and terrified. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know about the poison. I just wanted the house. I just wanted—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The shame choked her. "I know," I said softly. I knew she was telling the truth. And that was enough to start with. She was stripped of her pride, stripped of her husband, and stripped of her illusions. She was at rock bottom. And rock bottom is the only solid foundation upon which you can build something real. I stood up and offered her my hand. "Get up, Layla," I commanded. Not with malice, but with strength. She hesitated, then reached out. Her hand was shaking, but she grasped mine. I pulled her to her feet. "We have a lot of work to do," I said, looking her in the eye. "And you are going to help me clean up this mess, starting now." I turned to the stunned crowd, to the board members, to the Sharks. "The party is over," I announced. "Go home. Check your emails in the morning. There will be some changes in personnel." I turned my back on them and began to walk toward the exit, my hand resting firmly on my daughter's shoulder, guiding her out of the ruins of her former life and into the hard, cold reality of the one we were about to build together. The purge was complete. Now the reconstruction could begin. The ballroom was now a scene of controlled chaos, a masterpiece of justice painted on a canvas of excess. I stood near the stage, my hand resting on Layla's trembling shoulder for just a moment before I signaled for a uniform officer to escort her to a private waiting area. She did not need to see what was about to happen next. She had seen enough. As she disappeared through the side doors, I turned my attention back to the main floor. The air was thick with the scent of fear, a sharp metallic tang that cut through the lingering aroma of expensive perfume and roasted duck. Most of the guests were huddled near the walls, whispering, frantically checking their phones, only to find that the signal had been jammed. They were the innocent ones, or at least the ones whose crimes were merely moral. But there were others. Men who had been standing near the barmen with cold eyes and suits that cost more than my first house. They had not panicked when the video played. They had not gasped when Brent confessed to murder. Instead, they had slowly, quietly started moving toward the service exits. They were the investors Brent had brought in, the partners from down south who dealt in commodities that didn't appear on any stock exchange. They thought they were invisible. They thought they were untouchable in a room full of soft, wealthy sheep. They were wrong. I looked at Marcus. He was no longer playing the part of the subservient waiter. He had shed the serving tray and the slouch. He stood in the center of the room, his posture erect, radiating an authority that made the air around him seem to vibrate. He raised a hand not to serve a drink, but to give a command. Now, he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. The transformation was instantaneous. The dozen or so waiters who had been refilling champagne glasses and clearing plates suddenly dropped their facades. Trays clattered to the floor. From beneath their serving jackets, they drew badges and sidearms. The doors to the kitchen burst open, and a tactical team in full body armor flooded into the room. Their movements precise and fluid, like water flowing over rocks. "Ladies and gentlemen, keep your hands visible," Marcus shouted, his voice booming. "Federal agents, nobody moves unless instructed." The guests screamed a collective sound of shock, but the tactical team ignored them. They weren't interested in the bankers or the socialites. They moved with predatory speed toward the men by the bar, the cartel contacts. I watched with grim satisfaction as the arrogance was stripped from those men. They were used to intimidation, they were used to violence, but they were not used to being outmaneuvered in a ballroom. Within seconds they were on the ground, their faces pressed against the cold marble zip ties, cinching their wrists behind their backs. The polite facade of the gala had been shattered, revealing the ugly criminal underbelly that Brent had invited into my home. Marcus walked over to one of the men on the ground, a man named Castillo, who had laughed earlier when Brent made a joke about my health. Marcus didn't say a word. He just looked down at him, checked the man's face against a photo on his tablet, and nodded to his team. "Take them out the back," Marcus ordered, quietly. As the agents hauled the struggling criminals away, the room felt lighter, as if a toxic gas had been vented. Now only one piece of trash remained. The centerpiece. I walked toward the panic room screen, which was now dark. I held the remote in my hand. It was time to open the box. I made my way through the crowd, which parted for me with a mixture of awe and terror. I was no longer the invalid. I was the gatekeeper. I reached the heavy oak paneling that concealed the entrance to the basement vault. I punched in the code, not the code Brent knew, but the override code I had programmed the day the vault was installed. The hidden mechanism groaned. The hydraulic hiss of the steel door unsealing echoed through the silent room. It sounded like the breath of a dying beast. Slowly, agonizingly, the heavy door swung open. A cloud of white theatrical smoke billowed out, clinging to the floor. And then from the mist he emerged. Brent. He didn't walk out. He crawled. He was on his hands and knees, coughing violently, his eyes red and swollen from the crying and the smoke. His expensive tuxedo was ruined, the jacket gone, the shirt torn open. He looked small. He looked pathetic. But the most telling detail, the one that made the guests avert their eyes in secondhand embarrassment, was the dark, spreading stain on the front of his trousers. The man who wanted to be king had been reduced to a frightened child who couldn't control his own bladder. He scrambled out of the smoke, gasping for fresh air, clawing at the carpet. He looked up, his vision blurry, blinking against the harsh lights of the ballroom. He saw feet, dozens of pairs of shoes surrounding him. He looked up further, his neck craning until his eyes met mine. "Thaddeus," He wheezed, his voice a broken rasp. You let me out." I didn't answer. I just looked down at him, my face a mask of stone. He tried to stand, stumbling, his legs shaking so badly they could barely support his weight. He looked around the room, seeing the shocked faces of the guests, the police officers, the absence of his cartel friends. Confusion washed over him. He didn't understand how the world had flipped so completely in the span of an hour. Then his eyes landed on Marcus. Marcus was standing right next to me, holding his badge, his gun holstered but prominent on his hip. He was looking at Brent with a small, amused smile. Brent squinted. The recognition hit him slowly. He knew that face, but the context was wrong. He didn't see a federal agent. He saw the memory of a man he had bullied. "You," Brent stammered, wiping snot from his nose with the back of his hand. You're the IT guy." He pointed a shaking finger at Marcus. "I know you," Brent said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in his throat. "You're the temp, the one I fired last month because you spilled coffee in the server room. What are you doing here? Did the old man hire you to fix the Wi-Fi?" It was a moment of supreme irony. Even in his ruin, Brent's arrogance was the last thing to die. He couldn't process that someone he considered beneath him could be holding the keys to his destruction. Marcus stepped forward. He didn't look angry. He looked professional. He looked like a man who had done his job exceedingly well. "I wasn't spilling coffee," Brent Marcus said smoothly. "I was installing a mirror tap on your hard drive, and I wasn't fired. I concluded my on-site surveillance because I had everything I needed." Brent's mouth fell open. He looked from Marcus to me and back to Marcus. "Surveillance," Brent whispered. "Allow me to reintroduce myself." Marcus continued, his voice crisp and clear, ensuring every person in the room heard him. "I am Special Agent Marcus Thorne, head of the Cybersecurity Crimes Division for the FBI." The color drained from Brent's face so completely he looked like a corpse. "FBI," he breathed. "We have been tracking your money laundering operation for 8 months, Marcus explained, ticking the points off on his fingers. "We have every transaction. We have the shell companies in the Caymans. We have the crypto wallets you thought were untraceable. And thanks to your performance tonight, we also have a confession for attempted murder and elder abuse." Brent shook his head, backing away. "No," he muttered. "No, that's not... I didn't mean... It was just a panic room. Nobody heard that. It's soundproof." Marcus chuckled. "It was a cold sound. The room is soundproof." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "But the microphone I installed under the table isn't. And neither is the high-definition camera you were screaming at." Marcus took a step closer, leaning in until he was inches from Brent's face. "You see, Brent, when you look down on people, you miss what they are doing with their hands. While you were busy calling me a useless tech grunt and making me fetch your dry cleaning, I was building the case that is going to put you away for the rest of your natural life." Brent looked around wildly, seeking an ally, seeking a lawyer, seeking anyone who would look at him with something other than disgust. He found no one, but the confession, Brent stammered. "It's inadmissible. I was under duress. I thought there was a fire." I stepped forward then. I leaned down, resting my hands on my knees so I could look him directly in the eye. "There was no fire, Brent," I said softly, "just a little theatrical smoke and a heater. But you know what is real, the live stream." Brent froze. "Live stream?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I nodded toward the blackened screen. "Marcus hooked the feed up to a private server," I explained. "But we also broadcast it. To the board of directors. To the Washington field office. And, I believe Marcus has a sense of humor, to your personal social media accounts." Marcus nodded, confirming. 50,000 views and counting, Marcus added. "The comments are not supportive, I'm afraid." Hashtag Brent is over is trending. Brent's knees gave out. He collapsed back onto the floor, sitting in his own filth. The realization of the total, absolute annihilation of his reputation, his freedom, and his ego crushed him. He wasn't just going to jail. He was going to be a laughingstock. The man who cried for his mommy in a fake fire while confessing to murder. He covered his face with his hands and began to weep. Not the terrified screaming of earlier, but the quiet, broken sobbing of a man who knows he is already dead. Marcus gestured to 2 of his agents. "Get him up," Marcus ordered. "Read him his rights. And for God's sake, get him a towel before you put him in the car." As the agents hoisted Brent to his feet and began the monotone recitation of the Miranda rights, I watched him go. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Marcus. "We got him, Thaddeus," Marcus said quietly. "It's over." I looked at the young agent, the man who had played the role of a servant so perfectly to help an old man get justice. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, gripping his hand. Marcus smiled. "Just doing my job, sir. And hey, thanks for the tip about the wine. The still water signal classic." I watched as they marched Brent out the front doors, the flashing lights of the police cruisers illuminating the night outside. The party was over. The house was a mess. My family was broken. But as I stood there surrounded by the wreckage, I felt a strange sense of renewal. The storm had passed. The dead wood had been cleared away. And now finally, I could start to plant something new. The flashing blue and red lights from the police cruisers danced across the high windows of the ballroom, painting the walls in a chaotic rhythm of color. The party was officially over, but the real work was just beginning. The guests had been ushered out, their whispers of scandal trailing behind them like exhaust fumes. Now, the room belonged to the law. I stood near the center of the empty dance floor. My legs were tired, aching with a dull throb that reminded me of my age, but I refused to sit. Not yet. Sitting felt too much like the act of the invalid I had pretended to be for so long. Tonight I needed to stand. I needed to feel the ground solid beneath my feet. My attorney, Alistair, walked through the main doors. He was a man of few words and sharp suits, carrying a briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain the weight of the world. He walked straight to where I stood with the lead detective and Layla. Layla was still pale, clutching a glass of water with both hands, her eyes wide and unfocused. Alistair placed the briefcase on a cocktail table and clicked the latches open. The sound was sharp like a gunshot in the quiet room. He pulled out a thick stack of documents and laid them out. He looked at the detective, then at Layla, and finally at me. "It is done," Alistair said, his voice calm and professional. "We have reviewed the documents seized from Brent's private safe in the study." He picked up a single sheet of paper. It was the power of attorney document, the piece of paper that Brent had waved in my face so many times. The paper he claimed gave him total control over my life, my medical decisions, and my fortune. "This," Alistair said, holding the paper up to the light, "is a forgery, and not even a very good one." Layla stepped forward, her voice trembling. "But he had it notarized," she whispered. "He told me everything was legal. He said you signed it 3 years ago before you got sick." Alistair shook his head slowly. He might have bought a notary, Layla, but he could not buy the truth. "Look closely at the date." He pointed to the bottom of the page. "November 14th, 2021. Alistair read. I allowed a small, dry smile to touch my lips. "Do you remember where I was on November 14th, 2021? "Layla," I asked softly. She frowned, searching her memory. The date meant nothing to her. She had been too busy with her tennis lessons and her social clubs to track her father's schedule. "I was in Zurich," I answered for her. "I was undergoing an experimental treatment for my knees. My passport stamps prove I was 4,000 miles away from the desk where this document was supposedly signed." Unless Brent has invented teleportation, his claim to my empire is built on a lie so fragile a child could poke a hole in it. The detective nodded, taking notes on his pad. "So, the document is void?" the detective asked. "Completely," Alistair confirmed. "Which means every transaction Brent has made in the last 3 years, every transfer of funds, every sale of stock is legally considered theft. He did not have the authority to move a single penny." I watched Layla process this. The house she thought was hers, the cars, the status, it all evaporated in that moment. But the news got worse for my son-in-law. Alistair pulled another file from his bag. "We have also moved for an immediate freezing of all assets held in Brent's name," Alistair continued. "Not just the money he stole from Thaddeus, but his personal accounts as well. The federal government has initiated a civil forfeiture procedure under the RICO Act due to the money laundering charges." I looked at the screen where Brent's face had been projected earlier. "He is destitute," I said, stating the fact simply. "He is worse than destitute," Alistair corrected. "He is liable for restitution. The government will seize his apartment in the city, his offshore accounts, and even his watch collection to pay back the victims of the cartel scheme he was facilitating. When he eventually stands trial, he will be doing so with a public defender. He won't have the money to buy a cup of coffee, let alone a high-powered defense team. The sheer scale of the destruction was breathtaking. Brent had not just fallen from the ladder, he had pulled the entire ladder down on top of himself. He was facing charges of attempted murder, elder abuse, grand larceny, wire fraud, and money laundering. The district attorney would likely seek consecutive sentences. Brent was 35 years old. He would be an old man, older than I was now, before he ever saw the outside of a prison cell again. Just then, a commotion at the side entrance drew our attention. 2 officers were escorting Viola out of the kitchen area. She was not going quietly. The handcuffs were tight on her wrists, forcing her shoulders back in an awkward, painful angle. Her uniform, usually so pristine, was disheveled. Her hair had come loose from its bun, hanging in straggly gray wisps around her face. She saw me standing there. She saw Layla, and she began to scream. It wasn't him, she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. It wasn't my idea. He made me do it. She struggled against the officers, digging her heels into the carpet, trying to stop her forward momentum. She wanted to talk. She wanted to bargain. "Mr. Thaddeus!" She yelled, tears streaming down her face, cutting through her heavy foundation. "Please, you know me. I have served you for 20 years. I ironed your shirts. I cooked your meals." I turned slowly to face her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a profound, cold disappointment. "He told me he would fire me," Viola cried, desperate to find a scapegoat. "Brent said if I did not help him, he would throw me out on the street without a pension. He said you were losing your mind anyway," he said. "It was a mercy. I was scared, sir. I was just an old woman doing what she was told. She was trying to rewrite history in real time, painting herself as the victim of a tyrannical boss. It was pathetic." I motioned for the officers to pause. They stopped, holding her firmly by the arms. I walked over to her. I stopped 3 feet away, close enough to smell the fear on her, but far enough to keep my distance from her toxicity. "You had a choice, Viola," I said, my voice low and steady. She shook her head frantically. "No, I didn't. He is a monster. He manipulated me. Every morning I continued ignoring her interruptions. You came into my room. You looked me in the eye. You asked me how I slept. And every morning for the last 6 months you slipped a crushed powder into my tea." "Did Brent hold your hand when you did that? Did he force the spoon into the cup?" Viola's mouth opened and closed. She had no answer. "You did it because you are greedy," I said. "You did it because $50,000 meant more to you than my life. You sold 20 years of loyalty for the price of a mid-sized sedan." I didn't think it would kill you," she whimpered, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He said it would just make you sleep, and when I didn't wake up, I asked, 'What was the plan then, Viola? Were you going to cry at my funeral? Were you going to accept the condolences of my daughter while you spent your blood money on a trip to Paris?'" She looked down at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. The reality of her actions was finally crashing down on her. She wasn't a victim. She was an accomplice to attempted murder. "Take her away!" I said to the officers. "No," Viola screamed again as they began to drag her toward the waiting police van. "Layla, help me. I raised you." "Layla." I looked at my daughter. Layla was standing like a statue. Tears were rolling down her cheeks, but she didn't move. She didn't look at Viola. She looked straight ahead, her jaw set in a hard line. She had finally realized that the woman she thought was her second mother was actually the woman who had tried to orphan her. The doors closed behind Viola, cutting off her wails. Silence returned to the ballroom. It was a heavy, exhausted silence. Alistair cleared his throat. "There is a lot of paperwork to sort through, Thaddeus," he said gently. "The police will need statements. The press is already gathering at the front gate. We need to manage the narrative." I nodded. I knew the drill. The world would want to know how the great tycoon had been fooled or how he had outsmarted them. They would want the sensational headlines. "Handle the press." "Alistair," I said, "tell them whatever you want. Tell them I am retiring. Tell them I am coming back. It doesn't matter." I turned to Layla. She looked small and lost in the middle of the wreckage of her life. "Come," I said to her. She looked up startled. "Where?" she asked. I pointed toward the large glass doors that led to the terrace. Outside, I said, "The air in here is stale." We walked out onto the terrace. The night air was crisp and cool. Below us, the city lights twinkled like a sea of diamonds. It was the view I had paid millions for, the view Brent had coveted, the view Viola had wanted to sell. Layla wrapped her arms around herself, shivering slightly. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered. "I've said it 100 times, but I don't know what else to say. I'm so sorry. I was so stupid." I leaned against the stone railing, looking out at the horizon. "You were," I agreed. I wasn't going to coddle her. Truth was the only currency we had left. You were blind, Layla. You let a shiny object distract you from what was real. You let a stranger whisper in your ear, and you forgot the voice of the man who raised you. She lowered her head, sobbing softly. But I continued, my voice softening just a fraction. You are not him. You are not Viola. When the moment came when the violence started, you didn't run. You fought for me. I looked at her. That counts for something. She looked up, hope fragile in her eyes. What do we do now? She asked. He spent so much. The accounts... Are we broke? I laughed. It was a genuine, hearty laugh that surprised even me. Broke? I shook my head. Layla, the money Brent stole was the operating capital. It was the petty cash. The trust funds, the real estate portfolio, the offshore bonds, those have been locked in a blind trust that I control since the day I suspected him. Her eyes widened. You mean, you knew all along I knew enough, I said. I built a firewall around the family fortune before I ever sat in that wheelchair. This house, this party, the accounts he had access to, it was all bait. It was a honey trap designed to catch a bear. And we caught him. I reached out and put a hand on her shoulder. We are not broke, Layla. We are free. The parasite is gone. The infection is treated. Now we have to heal. I looked back at the house. It felt different now. It was no longer a prison. It was a blank slate. Tomorrow, I said, we are going to hire a new staff. We are going to change the locks. And we are going to have a very long conversation about your future. You are going to learn how to manage this money, Layla. Not how to spend it. How to manage it. You are going to learn the business. Because I am not going to be here forever. And I will be damned if I let another Brent walk into this house and take what is ours. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay, she said. Okay, Daddy. I looked up at the moon. It was full and bright, casting a silver light over the garden. The nightmare was over. The silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. Let's go inside, I said. I believe there is still some untouched cake in the kitchen. And after the night we have had, I think we both deserve a slice. We walked back into the house together, leaving the darkness behind us, ready to design a new life, one built not on lies and easy money, but on the hard, unshakable foundation of the truth. The silence in the mansion was different now. For 30 days the house had been quiet, but it was no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets and hidden agendas. It was the echo of emptiness. The staff was gone. The parties were over. The sharks had been cleared from the waters. I sat in my study, the leather chair creaking beneath me as I shifted my weight. The rain was drumming a steady, rhythmic beat against the tall French windows, washing away the dust of the last month. I looked at the empty space on the desk where the picture of Brent and Layla used to sit. I had burned it in the fireplace 3 weeks ago. Now the only thing on the mahogany surface was a single rolled-up sheet of architectural paper and a set of silver keys. The intercom buzzed. It was a jarring sound in the stillness. "Ms. Layla is at the gate, sir." The security guard's voice crackled. He was the only employee I had kept. A large, silent man who knew better than to ask questions. "Let her in," I said, leaning back. I waited. I listened to the sound of a car engine approaching up the long driveway. It wasn't the roar of the Porsche she used to drive, nor the purr of the Mercedes Brent had leased with my money. It was the sputter of a taxi. 10 minutes later, the heavy oak doors of the study opened. Layla stood there. She looked like a stranger. The glamorous, sharp-edged woman who had hosted galas and sneered at the help was gone. In her place was a woman who looked tired. She was wearing a simple pair of jeans and a gray sweater that looked like it had been bought off a rack at a discount store. Her hair, usually a helmet of hairspray and highlights, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore no makeup. The dark circles under her eyes told a story of sleepless nights and the kind of stress that money usually protects you from. She didn't walk in with her chin up. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, leaning against it for a moment as if she needed the support. "Hello, Dad," she said. Her voice was small. "Hello, Layla," I replied. I didn't get up. I gestured to the chair opposite me. "Sit down." She walked across the room, her footsteps quiet on the Persian rug. She sat down on the edge of the chair, clutching her purse in her lap. She looked around the room, her eyes lingering on the empty spaces on the walls where paintings had been removed for auction, on the dust covers draped over the sofas in the hallway. "It is so quiet," she whispered. "Peaceful," I corrected her. She looked at me then. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She had done enough crying in the last month. The tabloids had been merciless. The princess of the Ponzi scheme, they called her. Even though the FBI had cleared her of any criminal involvement, the court of public opinion had sentenced her to shame. Brent's assets were frozen or seized. The penthouse was gone. The jewelry was evidence. She was, for the first time in her 30 years of life, entirely and completely broke. "I came to say I am sorry," she began, the words rushing out as if she had rehearsed them 1,000 times. "I know saying it doesn't fix anything. I know I was stupid. I know I let him hurt you." I held up a hand. "We are past apologies, Layla," I said. "I know you are sorry. I saw your face when Viola attacked me. I saw you tackle her. That act bought you a lot of grace in my book. It proved that beneath the layers of entitlement, there is still a human being." She looked down at her hands. "I have nothing, Dad," she admitted. "The lawyers said everything Brent put in my name is being clawed back to pay the victims. I have been sleeping on a friend's couch, but she asked me to leave yesterday. She said the reporters outside her building were bothering the neighbors." She took a shaky breath. "I need help, Dad. I don't need the money. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to live." I watched her. This was the moment I had been dreading and hoping for, the moment of total breakage. It is a terrible thing for a father to see his child broken, but sometimes a bone has to be broken to be reset correctly. For years, I had been the crutch that allowed her to limp through life without ever developing any strength of her own. I had given her money when she was sad. I had bought her cars when she was bored. I had created a vacuum where her character should have been. I picked up the rolled-up paper from my desk. "I know you have nothing," I said. "And to be honest, Layla, that is the best thing that could have happened to you." She looked up, startled by the harshness of the words. I slid the paper across the desk toward her. "Open it," I commanded. She reached out with trembling fingers and unrolled the blueprint. She stared at it, confused. It wasn't a blueprint for a mansion. It wasn't a design for a beach house in Malibu or a chalet in Aspen. It was a floor plan for a studio apartment. 600 square feet, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a small kitchenette. "What is this?" she asked, looking up at me. I picked up the silver keys and placed them on top of the paper. "This is your new home," I said. She blinked. "My new home, I bought it yesterday," I explained. "It is in my name, so the government cannot seize it to pay for Brent's crimes. It is fully paid for." She looked at the address at the bottom of the page. "Queens," she read aloud. "Astoria." "It is a good neighborhood," I said. "It is safe. It is loud. It is alive. There is a bakery downstairs that smells like fresh bread every morning at 4 a.m. There is a subway station 2 blocks away that will take you into the city in 20 minutes. She looked at the blueprint again, trying to process the scale of it. It was smaller than her closet in the penthouse. "Dad, she stammered. "Listen to me closely, Layla." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a serious, intense register. "This is not a punishment. This is a lifeline, but it comes with conditions." I pointed a finger at the paper. "Condition number 1. You live there rent-free. I will pay the property taxes and the water bill. That is it." She nodded slowly. "Condition number 2, I continued. The electricity, the internet, the food in your fridge, the clothes on your back, that is on you. I have cut off your credit cards. I have closed your allowance account. From this moment forward, you do not get a single dollar from me." Her eyes widened. The panic was rising. "But how?" she whispered. "I don't have a job." "Then you will get one," I said simply. "I don't care what it is," I told her. "You can wait tables, you can answer phones, you can fold clothes at a retail store. You are young, you are able-bodied. You have 2 hands and a brain. That is more than most people start with. But I don't know how to do anything." She protested, a tear finally escaping and rolling down her cheek. "Then you will learn," I said. "You will learn the value of a dollar, because for the first time in your life you are going to have to trade your time and your sweat to earn it." I stood up and walked around the desk. I stood in front of her. She looked so small in the chair. "Layla, look at me." She looked up. "For 30 years I crippled you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was loving you by giving you everything you wanted. But I was wrong. I made you weak. I made you a target for men like Brent. He saw a woman who needed to be taken care of, a woman who didn't know the price of milk, a woman who would sign anything just to keep the comfort flowing." I kneeled down so I was eye level with her. "I am not going to let that happen again. I am giving you this apartment because I love you, but I am forcing you to work because I respect you enough to believe that you can." She stared at me. The reality was sinking in. No more drivers, no more personal shoppers, no more safety net. "You want me to be normal," she said. I shook my head. "No, I want you to be independent. I want you to wake up in the morning in a bed you made, eat breakfast you bought with your own money, and walk out into the world knowing that no matter what happens, you can survive." I took her hand and pressed the cold keys into her palm. "This is the last thing I will ever give you, Layla. This is the last act of pity. From now on, if you want dinner with me, you are paying for your own share. If you want a new dress, you save up for it." She looked at the keys in her hand. They were heavy. They looked like ordinary keys, but to her they must have felt like the weight of an anchor. But then something shifted in her eyes. The fear was still there, yes. But there was something else, a spark of realization. She looked at the blueprint, really looked at it. 600 square feet. It was small, but it was a space that no one could kick her out of. It was a space where no husband could gaslight her, where no father could control her. She closed her hand around the keys. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay?" I asked. She took a deep breath and wiped her face with her sleeve. She stood up. She looked a little taller. "Okay," she repeated, her voice stronger. "I will take it. I will find a job. I think the coffee shop near the park is hiring." I saw a sign. I smiled. It was a genuine smile. "That sounds like a good start," I said. She looked at the door, then back at me. Can I call you?" she asked. "Not for money. Just to talk." I nodded. "My phone is always on for my daughter," I said. "But not for the princess. The princess doesn't live here anymore." She managed a weak, watery smile. "Goodbye, Dad," she said. "Goodbye, Layla," I replied. She turned and walked toward the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the vast, empty room one last time. Then she stepped out, closing the heavy oak door behind her with a definitive click. I walked to the window and watched. I saw her walk down the front steps. I saw her get back into the waiting taxi. I saw the taxi drive away, disappearing through the iron gates and turning toward the city, toward Queens, toward the noise and the grit and the real world. I let out a long breath that I felt I had been holding for years. The house was empty. I was alone. But for the first time, I wasn't worried about her. She was terrified, yes. She was struggling, but she was alive. And she was finally, truly awake. I turned back to my desk. I sat down and pulled a fresh sheet of paper from the drawer. I had a company to rebuild. I had a legacy to secure. But that work felt light now. The hardest job was done. I had saved my child. Not by pulling her out of the fire, but by teaching her how to walk through it. The sign on the lawn said, "For sale," but to me it read, "Freedom." I sat in the back of the sedan watching the realtor hammer the wooden stake into the manicured grass. That grass had cost me thousands of dollars a month to maintain. It was perfect green and entirely artificial, just like the life we had lived inside those walls. People told me I was crazy to sell. They said it was a landmark estate, one of the finest in the district. They talked about the marble floors and the custom molding and the wine cellar that was now famous for all the wrong reasons. But they didn't understand. They saw a mansion. I saw a crime scene. Every room was tainted. The dining room was where Brent had lied to my face. The study was where he had forged my signature. The kitchen was where Viola had poisoned my tea. Even the air inside felt recycled heavy with the ghosts of betrayal. I didn't want to live in a museum of my own foolishness anymore. I wanted fresh air. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back. There was no tearful goodbye. There was only the sound of the tires on the asphalt, a rhythmic hum that sounded like moving forward. The money from the sale was substantial, astronomical, really. The market was hot, and the notoriety of the case had ironically increased the property's value. A tech billionaire from Silicon Valley wanted it. He could have it. I had a different plan for that capital. I didn't need another house. I had bought a comfortable cabin by the lake, modest but sturdy, built with cedar and stone. It was enough. The rest of the money, the millions that Brent had tried to steal and the millions the house had generated, went into a trust. I called it the Moore Foundation for Future Engineers. I spent my mornings reviewing applications. I wasn't looking for the kids with the perfect grades from the Ivy League prep schools. I was looking for the ones like I used to be. The kids from the rough neighborhoods, the ones with dirt under their fingernails and fire in their bellies, the ones who looked at a broken radio and didn't see trash but saw a puzzle to be solved. I wanted to give them the one thing I never had: a head start. Reading their essays healed something in me. It reminded me that ambition isn't evil. Greed is evil. Ambition is just the fuel for building something better. 6 months had passed since the night of the gala. The leaves were turning gold and crimson, reflecting off the surface of the lake. It was a Saturday morning, quiet and crisp. I sat on the end of the wooden dock, a fishing rod in my hand. The line disappeared into the dark water, a thin connection to the unknown below. Footsteps sounded on the wooden planks behind me. I didn't turn around. I knew that heavy, confident stride. "The fish are sleeping, Marcus," I said, keeping my eyes on the red and white bobber floating on the surface. "You are making too much noise." Marcus laughed. It was a good sound. He wasn't wearing his FBI windbreaker or his waiter's uniform. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, looking every bit the fisherman he claimed to be. He sat down beside me, dangling his legs over the edge of the dock. He had brought 2 coffees. He handed me one. Black, no sugar. He remembered. "How is the quiet life treating you, Thaddeus?" he asked, taking a sip of his steaming cup. I took a deep breath of the pine-scented air. "It is loud," I admitted. "The crickets, the wind, the frogs. It is much louder than the city. But the difference is that this noise is honest. The wind doesn't lie to you, Marcus. It just blows." He nodded, looking out across the water. We sat in companionable silence for a long time. It was strange, this friendship between an old tycoon and a young federal agent. But battle creates bonds that peacetime never can. We had been in the trenches together. We had taken down a monster. "He is pleading guilty, you know," Marcus said softly. "Brent. His lawyer called yesterday. They are taking the deal. 25 years, no parole." I watched the bobber bob slightly in the ripples. 25 years, I repeated. "He will be 60 when he gets out, if he survives." "He won't have anything when he gets out," Marcus added. "Layla." "She finalized the divorce papers this morning." I nodded. Layla was doing better. She was still working at the coffee shop. She was tired and her feet hurt, and she complained about the customers, but she paid her own electric bill last month. She sent me a picture of the receipt. She was prouder of that scrap of paper than she had ever been of her diamond earrings. Marcus turned to look at me. His expression was serious. The playfulness was gone. "Can I ask you something, sir?" he asked. I reeled in the line, a little checking the tension. "You can ask me anything, Marcus. You saved my life. You don't need to call me sir." "Do you regret it?" he asked. I looked at him confused. "Regret what?" "Burning it all down," Marcus said, gesturing vaguely back toward the direction of the city, toward the memory of the empire I had dismantled. "You destroyed your company's reputation. You sent your son-in-law to prison. You imprisoned your housekeeper. You forced your daughter into poverty. You sold your home. You are sitting here on a dock in the middle of nowhere." He paused, searching for the right words. "Do you feel sad, Thaddeus? Do you feel like you lost?" I looked at the young man. I saw the genuine concern in his eyes. He was wondering if the victory was worth the cost. It was a fair question. From the outside, it looked like a tragedy. A family destroyed. A fortune scattered. I smiled. I turned my gaze back to the water where the sun was just beginning to burn through the morning mist. "Marcus," I said, my voice low and steady, "let me tell you something about construction." I pointed to the cabin behind us. "When you build a house, you worry about the wind and the rain. You worry about the roof leaking. You worry about the paint peeling. Those are the problems you can see. I reeled in the line and cast it out again, the lure landing with a soft splash. But the real enemy isn't the storm, it is the termite. The termite eats from the inside. It eats the darkness. You look at the beam and it looks solid. It looks strong. But inside it is dust. I looked at Marcus. My family was eaten by termites, Marcus. The love was gone. The loyalty was gone. It was just a hollow shell held up by money and lies. If I had left it alone, if I had kept the peace, the roof would have collapsed on top of me. It would have buried me in my sleep. I took a sip of the coffee. It was hot and bitter and real. When the foundation is eaten by termites, you have to tear it down, I said firmly. You have to take a sledgehammer to the walls. You have to rip up the floorboards. You have to expose the rot to the sunlight. Does it hurt? Yes. It hurts like hell to destroy what you built. It breaks your heart to see the walls come down. I looked him right in the eye. But Marcus, it is better to stand in the rubble of the truth than to live in a palace of lies, because on the rubble you can build something new, something smaller maybe, but something that will stand. Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing the words. I didn't lose Marcus, I concluded. I cleaned house. And now for the first time in 20 years, I can sleep at night without wondering who is sharpening a knife in the kitchen. As if on cue, my fishing rod bent sharply. The line sang as it cut through the water. I think we have got one, I shouted, the adrenaline surging. Marcus grabbed the net, his face lighting up with a grin. Bring him in, Thaddeus. Bring him in. I fought the fish, feeling the life and the energy on the other end of the line. I wasn't an invalid. I wasn't a victim. I was a man fishing with his friend on a beautiful morning, and that was worth more than any chandelier in the world. I realized that blind trust is not love. It is negligence. For years, I let my desire for a perfect family blind me to the cracks in the foundation. I thought my role as a father was just to build the house and pay the bills, but I forgot to guard the door. Evil doesn't always break in with a gun. Sometimes it walks in with a smile, marries your daughter, and calls you dad. The blueprint of a happy life requires regular inspections, and sometimes you have to be willing to tear down the walls to save the soul inside. Protect your legacy, but protect your peace even more fiercely. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever had to make a tough decision to protect your peace? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. See you in the next video.